What's up, story lovers? Welcome to Harryverse X. In today's video, we have a fantastic tale for you. What if Nico Di Angelo found Harry at age 5 in the cupboard and trained him as a son of Hades' Necromancer? If this is your first time here, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you never miss a story. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you for your continued support. Alright, let's jump right into it. Chapter 1, Shadows in the Cupboard. Nico Di Angelo had felt death before. Hell, he practically bathed in it, but this was different. The pull yanked at his gut like a fishhook, dragging him across continents until he found himself standing on a perfectly ordinary street in suburban England. Privet Drive. The houses stood in neat little rows, carbon copies of each other with their manicured lawns and identical driveways. Well, this is definitely not where I'd expect to find a death magic hotspot, Nico muttered, running a hand through his shaggy black hair. At 16, Nico wasn't exactly thrilled about being sent on another one of his father's errands. But when the Lord of the Underworld says jump, you don't even ask how high, you just do it before he turns you into a dandelion or something equally humiliating. So when Hades had sensed an unusual concentration of death energy in Surrey, England, guess who got volunteered to check it out? The strange thing was, Nico felt it too. Like a beacon calling to his very essence. Not just regular death, those were a dime a dozen in any hospital or retirement home, but actual death magic. Raw. Untrained. And coming from, number 4. Nico glanced up and down the empty street. It was just after midnight, and the houses were dark except for the occasional porch light. Perfect timing for a son of Hades to do some investigating without nosy mortals getting in the way. He closed his eyes, letting his senses stretch out. The death energy pulsed stronger now, like a heartbeat. But there was something else tangled with it, another type of magic he couldn't quite identify. Something that felt ancient and yet distinctly different from Greek, Roman, or even Egyptian pantheons he'd encountered before. Only one way to find out, he said to himself, stepping toward the shadows cast by a nearby tree. Shadow travel was second nature to him now. The familiar cold rush enveloped him as he stepped into darkness and emerged inside the house, in what appeared to be a spotless living room. Family photos lined the mantel, a large walrus-like man, a horse-faced woman, and a round boy who looked like he'd eaten one too many happy meals. Nico noticed immediately that another child was conspicuously absent from every frame. The death magic wasn't coming from upstairs. It was, below him. No, not quite. It was coming from a small cupboard under the stairs. Nico crept toward it, hand instinctively moving to the hilt of his Stygian iron sword. He was expecting. Well, he wasn't sure what. A cursed object? Some escaped soul from the underworld? A rogue monster? What he wasn't expecting was the small padlock fastened on the outside of the cupboard door. Who locks a cupboard from the outside? He whispered, frowning. With a flick of his wrist, the lock clicked open, one of the perks of being the son of the god who invented locks in the first place. Nico slowly pulled the door open and froze. Inside, curled up on a thin, dirty mattress, was a tiny boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with messy black hair and skin so pale it nearly glowed in the darkness. A pair of broken glasses sat next to his head, and he was wearing pajamas several sizes too large. But what caught Nico's attention wasn't the deplorable conditions or the spider webs decorating the cramped space. It was the shadows. They curled protectively around the boy like living things, almost caressing him in his sleep. And as Nico watched, stunned, the boy whimpered in some dream and the shadows thickened, solidifying briefly before dissolving back into ordinary darkness. Holy Hades, Nico breathed. He's controlling them in his sleep. The boy stirred at the sound, and Nico found himself staring into startlingly green eyes that seemed to glow with their own internal light. Who are you? The boy whispered, his British accent soft with sleep and fear. Are you a dream? Nico crouched down to eye level. No, I'm real. My name is Nico. What's yours? Harry. Harry Potter, the boy said, sitting up cautiously. Are you here to take me away? The hopeful note in his voice made something in Nico's chest twist painfully. He recognized that hope. He'd felt it himself once, when he was just a lost kid looking for somewhere to belong. Why would you want to be taken away, Harry? He asked carefully. Harry looked down at his hands. Because I'm a freak. I make bad things happen. That's why I have to stay in here, so I don't hurt anyone. As if on cue, the shadows around him shifted again, reaching out toward Nico before retreating. You're not a freak, Nico said firmly. You can just do things other people can't. Things like this. Nico held out his hand and concentrated. Shadows gathered in his palm, solidifying into a small figurine of a horse that pranced in circles before dissolving. Harry's eyes went wide, his mouth forming a perfect O of astonishment. You can do it too. The freaky stuff. It's not freaky. It's power. And yes, I can do it too. Actually, Nico tilted his head, studying the boy more closely. I think we might be related, in a way. The death magic emanating from the child was unmistakable now that Nico was close. But there was definitely something else there too, another type of magic layered over it. Whatever Harry was, he wasn't just a demigod. Which meant Hades couldn't be his father, technically speaking. But the connection was there, strong enough that Nico could almost taste it. Related? But I don't have any family except Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. And Dudley, Harry added with a slight grimace. The people who keep you locked in a cupboard, Nico said flatly. Harry nodded, looking away. Only when I'm bad. Or when company comes. Or when Dudley wants to play Harry hunting. Nico had seen a lot in his short life. The underworld. Tartarus. War. Monsters that would make most mortals lose their minds with terror. But in that moment, hearing the casual way this little boy described his own abuse, he felt a cold rage that surpassed anything he'd experienced before. The shadows around them darkened, responding to his anger. The temperature in the small space dropped several degrees. Harry, Nico said carefully, reining in his emotions, would you like to learn how to control what you can do? To understand why you can make shadows move? Harry hesitated, glancing at the cupboard door. Uncle Vernon says magic isn't real. Your uncle is wrong. Magic is very real. And you have a lot of it. As if to underscore Nico's point, the shadows around Harry's feet suddenly solidified, lifting him about an inch off the mattress before dropping him back down. Harry gasped. I did that? You did. But you could learn to do it on purpose, not just when you're scared or asleep. Harry bit his lip, thinking. Then he reached for his broken glasses and put them on, making his eyes look even bigger. Would I have to come back here? To Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon? The vulnerability in that question made Nico's decision for him. No. You would never have to come back here again. Light suddenly flooded the hallway, and a thunderous voice bellowed from upstairs. Who's down there? I've called the police. Heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs, each one shaking dust from the ceiling of the cupboard. Harry shrank back against the wall, terror written across his face. It's Uncle Vernon, he whispered. He'll be really angry. Let him be angry, Nico said, rising to his feet and stepping out of the cupboard to face the approaching threat. Vernon Dursley was exactly as unappealing in person as his photos suggested, a large man with hardly any neck and a bushy mustache that quivered with indignation. He wore striped pajamas stretched tight over his substantial belly, and his face was turning an alarming shade of purple. Who the bloody hell are you? He roared, raising a cricket bat. Burglar. Thief. He stopped short when Nico's sword materialized in his hand, 3 feet of deadly Stygian iron that seemed to absorb the light around it. I wouldn't take another step if I were you, Nico said quietly. Vernon's eyes bulged. You're one of them. One of his freaky kind. If by freaky kind, you mean people with actual human decency, then yes, I am, Nico replied. I'm taking Harry with me. Good riddance. Vernon spat. Been nothing but trouble since he was dumped on our doorstep. But the old man with the beard said he had to stay here. The old man with the beard is wrong, Nico cut him off. Harry belongs with people who understand what he is and can teach him to control his abilities. Vernon. What's happening? A thin woman appeared on the stairs behind her husband, her horse-like face pinched with suspicion. The boy's being taken, Vernon said. Good riddance, I say. The woman, Petunia, Nico presumed, glanced nervously at Nico's sword, then at Harry, who had crept out of the cupboard and was standing partially hidden behind Nico's legs. But Dumbledore said, I don't care what Dumbledore said, Nico interrupted again. I've seen enough. Harry is coming with me. You can't just take him. Petunia protested, though there was little conviction in her voice. We're his legal guardians. Guardians? Nico laughed, a cold sound that made both adults flinch. You keep him locked in a cupboard. He's wearing clothes that could fit a small whale. I'd bet good money he's underfed and neglected. Should I continue? Shadows began crawling up the walls, responding to Nico's rising anger. The temperature in the hallway plummeted until their breath fogged in the air. You know what I am, Nico said softly. You called me one of his kind. So you must know what I can do. Vernon and Petunia exchanged glances, fear evident on their faces. The boy's stuff is in the cupboard, Vernon said finally, lowering the cricket bat. Take it and him and get out. And don't bring him back. Trust me, I won't, Nico said. He turned to Harry, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. Get anything you want to keep, Harry. We're leaving. It took Harry less than a minute to gather his belongings, a pitiful collection that consisted of a few broken toy soldiers, a threadbare blanket, and a crude drawing of what looked like a flying motorcycle. Everything fit into a plastic grocery bag. No proper clothes. No toys that weren't broken hand-me-downs. No books. No photographs. Nico's rage threatened to boil over again, but he kept it in check for Harry's sake. Is that everything? He asked gently. Harry nodded, clutching the bag to his chest like it contained treasures. All right, then. We're going to travel in a special way, Harry. It might feel a bit cold and scary, but I promise it's safe. You'll need to hold my hand very tight and close your eyes. Harry slipped his tiny hand into Nico's without hesitation, a trust that felt both heartwarming and terrifying in its completeness. Where are we going? Harry asked. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can learn about what you can do. Before Vernon or Petunia could say another word, Nico pulled Harry into the nearest shadow. The darkness enveloped them, cold and thick like black molasses, and then they were gone, leaving behind an empty cupboard and two very shaken Dursleys. Harry was certain he'd never felt anything as strange as shadow travel. It was like being dunked in ice water while riding a roller coaster in the dark. He clung to Nico's hand, eyes squeezed shut as promised, feeling like he was being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. And then it was over. Warmth returned to his skin, and he could feel solid ground beneath his feet. You can open your eyes now, Nico said. Harry did, and immediately gasped. They were standing in what looked like an enormous cave, but unlike any cave Harry had ever imagined. The ceiling soared high above them, embedded with thousands of tiny crystals that glowed with a soft blue light. The walls were smooth black stone that seemed to shimmer when he moved his head. A small underground river flowed nearby, its water so clear he could see every pebble at the bottom. But the most impressive feature was the house, if you could call it that. Built directly into the cave wall was a structure that looked like a cross between a Greek temple and a modern cabin. Columns of black marble supported a sloping roof, and large windows glowed with warm yellow light. The front door was made of some dark wood with silver inlays that seemed to move if Harry looked at them too long. Welcome to my home, Nico said, a hint of pride in his voice. Well, one of them. I have a few places scattered around, but this is my favorite. It's brilliant, Harry breathed. Are we still in England? Not exactly. We're sort of, between places. This cave exists in a pocket between the mortal world and the underworld. My father helped me create it. The underworld? Harry asked, his eyes growing even wider behind his glasses. Like, where dead people go. Exactly like that, Nico said, guiding Harry toward the house. There's a lot I need to explain to you, but first, you need food, proper clothes, and rest. Not necessarily in that order. The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside. The main room was spacious with a high ceiling, comfortable-looking furniture in deep blues and grays, and walls lined with bookshelves. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace, though Harry didn't see any wood burning, just flames dancing over what looked like black rocks. Are you hungry? Nico asked. Harry nodded cautiously. He'd learned at the Dursleys not to admit to hunger too eagerly, but his stomach gave him away with a loud growl. Nico smiled. I'll take that as a yes. Come on, kitchen's this way. The kitchen was modern and well-equipped, though some of the appliances looked strange to Harry, almost like they were made of the same black stone as the cave. Nico opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients. How does pasta sound? It's about all I can make reliably. I can cook, Harry offered automatically. Aunt Petunia makes me cook breakfast most days. I'm good at eggs and bacon. Nico paused, a block of cheese in his hand. Harry, you're 5 years old. You shouldn't be cooking meals for anyone. I'm almost 6, Harry corrected. My birthday's in July. Still. No cooking for you unless it's for fun and with supervision. Got it? Harry nodded, a strange feeling bubbling in his chest. No one had ever told him he shouldn't have to cook before. While Nico prepared the meal, Harry sat at the kitchen island, swinging his legs and taking in his surroundings. Everything felt surreal, like a dream he might wake from at any moment to find himself back in the cupboard. So, Nico said as he put a pot of water on to boil, I guess you have questions. About 1 million, Harry admitted. Are you magic? Am I magic? Is that why weird things happen around me? Is that why Uncle Vernon calls me a freak? Where are we exactly? Why, Nico laughed, holding up his hands in surrender. Whoa, slow down. Yes to the first 2 questions. You are definitely magical, though in a rather unusual way. And no, those weird things don't make you a freak. They make you special. Powerful. Harry absorbed this, his mind racing. But what kind of magic? Like in stories? Can I make things float and disappear? Your magic is complicated, Nico said, choosing his words carefully as he added pasta to the now boiling water. From what I can tell, you have 2 different types. One is similar to mine, it's connected to shadows, darkness, and death. Death? Harry squeaked. It's not as scary as it sounds, Nico assured him. Death is a natural part of life. Having a connection to it doesn't make you evil or dangerous, it just means you can sense things others can't and interact with spirits and shadows in ways most people can't understand. Harry thought about this. Is that why I sometimes think I can hear my mum? When I'm really scared or sad? Nico nearly dropped the spoon he was holding. You can hear your mother. Your actual mother who passed away? Harry nodded. Just sometimes. It's like a whisper. She calls me love and tells me to be brave. I thought I was imagining it. You weren't imagining it, Nico said quietly. That's necromancy, the ability to communicate with the dead. It's extremely rare, even among people like me. What are people like you? Harry asked. Nico sighed, stirring the pasta. I'm a demigod. Half human, half god. My father is Hades, god of the underworld. Harry's jaw dropped. Like in the Greek myths. Zeus and Hercules and all that? Exactly like that, except they're not myths. The Greek gods are real, and they're still around, having children with mortals and interfering in human affairs. Nico drained the pasta and began adding sauce and cheese, using the task to give Harry a moment to process this information. So, am I a demigod too? Is that why I can do shadow stuff? And there it was, the million-drachma question. Nico placed a plate of pasta in front of Harry and sat down across from him with his own serving. That's where it gets complicated. You have abilities very similar to children of Hades, but you also have another type of magic I'm not familiar with. I don't think you're a demigod in the traditional sense. I think you're something else. Something unique. Harry poked at his pasta with his fork. So I really am a freak. No, Nico said firmly. You're not a freak. You're just a magical hybrid of some kind. And we're going to figure out exactly what that means together. Harry took a tentative bite of pasta and his eyes widened in delight. This is really good. Don't sound so surprised, Nico said with mock offense, relieved at the change in subject. I'm Italian. Good pasta is in my blood. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Harry spoke again. How did you find me? At the Dursleys? I felt your power, Nico explained. Death magic gives off a particular energy that I can sense. My father noticed it too, an unusual concentration of death energy in Surrey. He sent me to investigate, and I followed the trail straight to your cupboard. Harry nodded slowly, digesting this along with his pasta. What happens now? Now, we figure out exactly what you can do and teach you to control it. And, Nico added with a small smile, we give you a proper place to live. No more cupboards. I can stay here. With you? The hope in Harry's voice was almost painful to hear. If you want to. This place is safe, mortals can't find it, and even most magical beings would have trouble. You'd have your own room, proper clothes, regular meals. And training, of course. What kind of training? Nico grinned. The fun kind. Shadow travel, like we just did. Talking to spirits. Controlling darkness. Maybe even raising skeletons, if you have the aptitude for it. Harry's eyes grew round. Skeletons. Real ones. Very real. But that's advanced stuff. We'll start with the basics. Harry fell quiet, pushing the last bit of pasta around his plate. What is it? Nico asked. What if I'm not good at it? The magic stuff. What if I can't learn properly? The insecurity in his voice made Nico's heart ache. It was clear the Dursleys had done a number on Harry's self-confidence. Harry, you were manipulating shadows in your sleep. Most demigods can't do that even with years of training. Trust me, you'll be amazing. Harry's answering smile was small but genuine. Now, Nico said, standing to clear the plates, how about we find you a proper bedroom and some clothes that actually fit? Harry's new bedroom was bigger than the Dursleys' entire ground floor. At least, that's how it felt to him. The ceiling was lower than in the main room, creating a cozy atmosphere, and the walls were painted a deep blue that reminded Harry of the night sky. A large bed with fluffy blankets stood against one wall, and a desk with drawing supplies against another. Bookshelves held volumes with intriguing titles like Greek Mythology for Young Heroes and The Beginner's Guide to Shadow Manipulation. Best of all, there were no spiders, no dust, and no cousins stomping on the stairs above his head. This is all for me? Harry asked in disbelief. All yours, Nico confirmed. The bathroom's through that door. There should be clean pajamas in the dresser that will fit you, they'll adjust to your size automatically. Harry opened the drawer and pulled out a pair of soft black pajamas that looked far too big for him. As soon as he touched them, however, they shrank to exactly his size. Whoa, he breathed. Magic has its perks, Nico said with a smile. Get changed and into bed. It's late, and we have a lot to do tomorrow." Harry did as he was told, marveling at the softness of the pajamas against his skin. When he crawled into bed, he sank into the mattress with a contented sigh. He'd never felt anything so comfortable in his life. Nico sat on the edge of the bed. "Sleep well, Harry. If you need anything during the night, just call my name. I'll hear you." "You promise?" Harry asked. "I promise. No one's going to lock you in or leave you alone here." Harry nodded, his eyelids already drooping. It had been a very long night full of more excitement and change than he'd experienced in his entire short life. "Nico," he murmured sleepily. "Yes. Thank you for taking me away from there." "You're welcome, Harry," Nico said softly. "Now get some sleep." Harry was asleep almost before Nico reached the door. The next morning, Harry woke to the unfamiliar sensation of being well-rested and comfortable. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was still dreaming. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back, Nico appearing in his cupboard, the confrontation with the Dursleys, the shadow travel, this amazing hidden house. He sat up and put on his glasses, taking in the room once more in daylight. Light streamed in from what appeared to be windows, though Harry wasn't sure how that was possible inside a cave. The effect was similar to sunlight but somehow softer, more diffuse. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Harry? Are you awake?" Nico called. "Yes." Harry scrambled out of bed and opened the door. Nico stood there, looking slightly less goth than he had the night before. His black hair was pulled back in a small ponytail, and he wore a simple gray t-shirt with black jeans. "Morning. Sleep okay?" Harry nodded enthusiastically. "The bed is brilliant. Much better than my mattress in the cupboard." A shadow passed over Nico's face at the mention of the cupboard, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "Good. I've got breakfast ready, and then we need to go shopping. You need proper clothes, shoes, and some other supplies before we can start your training." "Shopping? Like, in actual shops?" Harry asked, surprised. "Of course. Why?" Harry shrugged. "I've never been. Aunt Petunia always left me with Mrs. Fig when she took Dudley shopping." Another flash of anger crossed Nico's features before he controlled it. "Well, today you're going shopping. But first, breakfast and a quick lesson about who you are. Get dressed, there are clothes in the closet that should fit you, just like the pajamas." Harry found a simple outfit in the closet, jeans, a green t-shirt, and a lightweight black hoodie, all of which adjusted to his size when he put them on. He also found a new pair of glasses that somehow corrected his vision perfectly. When he emerged, Nico led him to the kitchen where a breakfast of scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice awaited. Harry dug in hungrily while Nico began explaining. "So, as I mentioned last night, I'm a son of Hades, a demigod. Half human, half god. My mother was a human woman named Maria Di Angelo, and my father is Hades, god of the underworld." "That sounds cool," Harry said around a mouthful of eggs. "It has its moments," Nico admitted. "But it also means monsters try to kill me on a regular basis, other demigods are scared of me because of my father's reputation, and I spend a lot of time dealing with the dead." "The dead? Like ghosts?" "Ghosts, spirits, shades, all kinds of dead people. As a son of Hades, I can communicate with them, command them sometimes, and even summon them from the underworld if I need to." Harry's eyes widened. "And I can do that too?" "To some degree, yes. That's what we'll be training you to do. But," Nico held up a finger, "you also have another kind of magic that I don't fully understand yet. Last night, I made some calls, well, iris messages, but that's another lesson, and learned that you come from a completely different magical community." "I do?" "Yes. There's an entire society of witches and wizards hidden within the mortal world. They have their own government, schools, even sports. And according to my sources, your parents were part of that world. Harry nearly choked on his juice. My parents were magical. But Uncle Vernon said they died in a car crash because my dad was drunk. Nico's expression darkened. They lied to you, Harry. Your parents were a witch and wizard, and very powerful ones, from what I understand. They were murdered by an evil wizard when you were just a baby. Murdered? Harry whispered, his appetite suddenly gone. Yes. His name was Voldemort, though most wizards are too afraid to say his name out loud, they just call him, you-know-who, or, he who must not be named. Despite the gravity of the conversation, Harry couldn't help but giggle at that. That's a silly thing to call someone. It is, Nico agreed with a small smile. Fear makes people do silly things. Anyway, this Voldemort was terrorizing the wizarding world, killing anyone who opposed him. Your parents, Lily and James Potter, fought against him. One night, he came to your house and killed them, but when he tried to kill you too, something extraordinary happened. What? Harry was on the edge of his seat now. His killing spell rebounded and hit him instead. He was destroyed, and you survived with only that scar on your forehead. Nico pointed to the lightning-shaped mark Harry had had for as long as he could remember. I survived a killing spell. Harry's hand went to his forehead, touching the scar with new understanding. Is that why I can do shadow stuff? Because I didn't die when I was supposed to. That's, actually a really insightful question, Nico said, looking impressed. It might be part of it. You survived a killing curse, which might have left a connection to death magic. But there's more to it than that. The ability to manipulate shadows and communicate with the dead is usually only found in children of Hades or other underworld deities. So my dad. James, could he have been a son of Hades too? Nico shook his head. No, demigods and wizards are different magical species, if you will. They don't usually mix. Your situation is unique, which is why my father noticed you. Harry pushed his empty plate away, his mind racing with questions. So I'm part wizard and part, death magic user? Necromancer is the term. And yes, that seems to be the case. Which makes you something unprecedented. A magical hybrid with access to two very different and very powerful types of magic. Is that good or bad? Nico considered the question seriously. It's neither. Power itself isn't good or bad, it's how you use it that matters. Some people will fear you because of your abilities, especially the necromancy. Death magic has a bad reputation, even among gods and demigods. But there's nothing inherently evil about talking to the dead or manipulating shadows. Harry nodded slowly. So, in the wizard world, am I famous? For surviving the killing spell? Very. They call you the boy who lived. There are books written about you, though most of them are probably rubbish since no one actually knows what happened at night except you, and you were too young to remember. Harry sat with this information for a moment, trying to reconcile the idea of being famous with his life in the cupboard. It didn't make sense. If I'm famous, why did they leave me with the Dursleys? Why didn't any wizards come check on me? That, Nico said grimly, is one of many questions I intend to get answers to. Someone placed you with your aunt and uncle deliberately and then left you there to suffer. I want to know who and why. The darkness in Nico's voice sent a shiver down Harry's spine, but strangely, it was comforting rather than frightening. It felt good to have someone angry on his behalf. For now, though, Nico continued in a lighter tone, we need to get you properly outfitted. Ready for your first shopping trip? Harry nodded eagerly, sliding off his chair. How will we get there? More shadow travel. Exactly. We're going to New York first. There's a demigod-friendly shopping area where we can get some basics without attracting too much attention. Then we'll visit Diagon Alley in London for your wizarding supplies. Diagon Alley. That sounds like something from a storybook. Wait until you see it, Nico said with a grin. It's like stepping back in time. But first, a quick lesson in controlling shadow travel. I don't want you getting sick when we jump. He led Harry to the main room and pointed to a particularly dark shadow cast by one of the columns. Shadow travel is all about intent and visualization. You need to picture exactly where you want to go and then step into the darkness with complete confidence. Hesitation can leave you stranded between places, which, trust me, is not fun. Harry swallowed nervously. What if I can't do it? You will, eventually. But today you're traveling with me. All you need to do is hold my hand and try to feel the shadows as we move through them. Pay attention to the sensation. The more you understand it, the easier it will be to do on your own later. Harry took Nico's offered hand, gripping it tightly. Ready? Nico asked. Harry nodded, determination replacing his nervousness. Ready. Then here we go. They stepped into the shadow together, and darkness enveloped them once more. The shopping district Nico took him to wasn't what Harry expected. Located in a seemingly abandoned subway station beneath Manhattan, it was a maze of shops selling everything from celestial bronze weapons to ambrosia-infused snacks. Signs in ancient Greek and Latin hung above doorways, and the shoppers were a bizarre mix, teenagers with swords strapped to their backs, satyrs munching on tin cans, and even a few cyclopes ducking to fit through the doorways. This is Hermes Market, Nico explained as they navigated the crowded underground bazaar. Named after the god of merchants and thieves. You can find almost anything here if you know where to look. Harry stayed close to Nico's side, wide-eyed at the sights around him. A girl about Nico's age with a bow and quiver walked past, nodding respectfully to Nico. A boy with what looked like small horns poking through his curly hair waved from a juice stand. Are all these people demigods? Harry whispered. Most of them. Some are nature spirits, minor gods, or friendly monsters. Don't worry, you're safe here. Anyone who can see through the mist to find this place is part of our world. The mist? Magical veil that hides the mythological world from ordinary mortals. If a regular person walked by that entrance up there, they'd just see a maintenance door with an out-of-order sign. They stopped at a shop with mannequins wearing everything from modern street clothes to full Greek battle armor. Hemorrhous wardrobe, Nico announced. Best place for clothes that can withstand monster attacks while still looking normal enough for the mortal world. A woman with glowing skin, literally glowing, like she had light bulbs under her flesh, greeted them from behind the counter. Nico Di Angelo. Haven't seen you in ages. Your usual black on black on black. Her voice was melodious, with an accent Harry couldn't place. Not today, Hemra. I need a complete wardrobe for young Harry here. Growing boy sizes, monster resistant, with extra shadow-friendly features. Hemra leaned over the counter to look at Harry, her eyes widening slightly. Oh my. What an interesting aura this one has. Not quite a demigod, is he? He's under my protection, Nico said simply, which seemed to be answer enough. Very well. Let's get him measured. The next hour passed in a blur as Harry was measured, fitted, and loaded up with more clothes than he'd ever owned in his life. T-shirts, jeans, hoodies, jackets, pajamas, and even formal wear, all in sizes that would grow with him for at least a year. These have basic protection charms, Hemra explained as she packed everything into a bag that seemed far too small to contain it all. Resistant to fire, acid, and minor slashing. They'll repair small tears automatically, and the fabric breathes even in extreme temperatures. Perfect, Nico said, handing over a small pouch that clinked with what sounded like coins. Their next stop was a shoe store run by a Cyclops who insisted on crafting Harry a custom pair of boots on the spot. Growing boy needs proper footwear, he boomed, measuring Harry's feet with surprising gentleness for such massive hands. These will expand 3 sizes and never wear out. Silent on any surface, good for sneaking. Harry left wearing his new boots, which were the most comfortable shoes he'd ever had. They were made of a strange black leather that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They visited several more shops, collecting everything from toiletries to a backpack that Nico said was enchanted to always feel light regardless of what was inside it. Now for the fun part, Nico said as they approached a store with weapons displayed in the window. Every hero needs a weapon. A real weapon? Harry asked, equal parts nervous and excited. But I'm only 5. Almost 6, Nico corrected with a wink. And yes, a real weapon. Nothing too big to start with, but something you can grow into. The shop was run by a burly man with a forge in the back that belched green flames. He nodded at Nico and immediately began pulling out small daggers and short swords for Harry to try. Too heavy, Nico would say to some. Too flashy, to others. Finally, the shopkeeper disappeared into a back room and returned with a small dagger made of the same black metal as Nico's sword. Stygian iron, the man grunted. Rare for one so young, but it feels right. The moment Harry touched the hilt, he knew it was perfect. The dagger was about 7 inches long with a slightly curved blade that seemed to drink in the light. The hilt fit his small hand as if made for him, wrapped in dark leather with a small emerald set in the pommel. This one, Harry said confidently. Nico examined it, looking impressed. Good choice. Stygian iron is perfect for necromantic magic. It can harm mortals, monsters, and spirits alike, and it helps channel death energy. Keep it with you at all times. Harry was given a sheath that attached to a special belt, which Nico showed him how to wear under his clothes for concealment. One more stop, Nico said as they left the weapons shop, and then we'll head to London. The final shop was small and tucked away in a corner, with no sign above the door. Inside, the walls were lined with bottles, jars, and packets of strange-looking ingredients. The air smelled of herbs and something else, something old and powerful. Hecate's supplies, Nico explained in a low voice. For magical ingredients that work with both Greek and other magical systems. We need a few basics for your training. A woman with 3 faces, literally, 3 distinct faces that seemed to rotate as she moved, greeted them from behind the counter. Son of Hades, all 3 mouths said in unison, and a most unusual companion. How may we serve you today? Supplies for a beginner necromancer, Nico said. The standard kit, plus anything you recommend for someone with hybrid magical abilities. The woman's faces rotated, each one examining Harry carefully before she nodded and began collecting items from the shelves. Black salt for protection circles. Asphodel honey for spirit attraction. Bone chalk for summoning diagrams. Poplar bark for communing with shades. She placed each item in a small wooden box as she named it. And for the hybrid nature, crushed moonstone to bridge different magical currents, unicorn hair for focus, and phoenix feather ash for transformation. She slid the completed box across the counter. A rare combination for a rare child. Use with care, son of Hades. Nico paid, and they left, their shopping complete. That was brilliant. Harry exclaimed as they made their way back toward the market entrance. Is Diagon Alley like this too? Similar but different, Nico said. The wizarding world has its own feel, less ancient Greek, more medieval European. But before we go there, I think it's time for your first actual training session. Let's head back home. Back at Nico's cave dwelling, Harry could barely contain his excitement. After putting away his new clothes and other supplies, he practically bounced into the main room where Nico had cleared a space in the center. All right, eager beaver, Nico said with a small smile, let's see what you can do. First lesson in necromancy, connecting with your internal death sense. Harry sat cross-legged on the floor as instructed, trying to look serious despite his enthusiasm. Close your eyes, Nico said, sitting across from him. Now, everyone has a life energy, a sort of internal flame that burns from birth until death. Necromancers can sense that flame in others, and can also sense when it's absent or fading. Harry closed his eyes, listening intently. Try to feel your own life energy first. It should feel warm, centered in your chest or gut. Harry concentrated, frowning slightly. After a moment, he felt something, a warm pulse that seemed to originate somewhere behind his navel. "I think I feel it," he said. "It's like a warm spot inside me." "Good. Now, try to sense mine. Reach out with your awareness, like you're extending an invisible hand toward me." This was harder. Harry concentrated until his forehead hurt, trying to feel something, anything, beyond his own body. "I can't," he said finally, opening his eyes in disappointment. "It's okay," Nico assured him. "This is advanced stuff. Most demigods train for years before they can sense life energy in others. Let's try something simpler." Nico held out his hand, palm up. Shadows gathered above it, swirling into a small dark vortex. Shadows are easier to manipulate than life energy. They're physical manifestations of the absence of light, which is closely tied to the absence of life. Try to feel the shadow I'm holding, not with your eyes, but with your senses. Harry closed his eyes again and reached out mentally toward where he knew Nico's hand was. This time, he felt something, a cool, silky presence that seemed to call to him. "I feel it," he said excitedly. "It's cold and kind of slippery." "Excellent. Now, hold out your own hand and try to pull shadows toward you. Imagine you're tugging on invisible strings attached to all the dark places in the room." Harry held out his hand, concentrating on the feeling he'd identified. At first, nothing happened. Then he felt a slight tug, as if the shadows were responding to his call but couldn't quite reach him. "Almost," Nico encouraged. "Don't try to force it. Shadows respond better to gentle persuasion than commands." Harry relaxed his effort slightly, thinking of the shadows as shy animals he was coaxing rather than servants he was ordering. Suddenly, he felt a rush of cold as darkness flowed toward his outstretched hand, gathering into a small, wobbling ball of shadow. "I did it," he cried, opening his eyes to see the proof floating above his palm. The moment he lost concentration, however, the shadows dispersed, returning to their normal places around the room. "That was amazing for a first try," Nico said, looking genuinely impressed. "It took me weeks to do what you just did in minutes." Harry beamed with pride. "Can we try again?" For the next hour, they practiced shadow manipulation. By the end, Harry could consistently gather shadows into his hand and even shape them into simple forms like cubes or spheres before they dissipated. He was exhausted but exhilarated. "You're a natural," Nico said as they took a break for lunch. "I think we should try something a bit more advanced this afternoon." "What?" Harry asked eagerly. "Contacting the dead." Harry nearly choked on his sandwich. "Like ghosts?" "Exactly like ghosts. Specifically, I think we should try to contact your parents." The sandwich forgotten, Harry stared at Nico in shock. "We can do that? Really talk to them?" "I think so. The connection is already there, you said yourself you sometimes hear your mother's voice. We're just going to strengthen that connection and make it two-way." Harry could hardly contain himself through the rest of lunch. The possibility of actually speaking to his parents, even as spirits, was beyond anything he'd dared to hope for. After eating, Nico led him to a different room Harry hadn't seen before. It was smaller than the others, with no windows and walls painted matte black. In the center was a circular pit filled with what looked like obsidian sand. "This is my summoning room," Nico explained. "The sand is from the banks of the river Styx, mixed with crushed obsidian and bone dust. It helps create a focus point for spirits to manifest." He opened the wooden box they'd purchased earlier and removed several items, the bone chalk, black salt, and a small vial of golden liquid Nico identified as the asphodel honey. "I'm going to draw a protective circle," Nico said, kneeling at the edge of the pit. "This ensures that only the spirits we specifically call can enter, and that they can't harm us in any way." Harry watched as Nico used the chalk to draw complex symbols around the edge of the pit, occasionally sprinkling the black salt at specific points. When he was done, he placed a small bowl in the center and poured the golden honey into it. Offerings are important, he explained. Spirits expend energy to manifest in our world, and this helps give them the strength to do so. Asphodel honey is particularly good because it comes from the fields where most ordinary souls reside in the underworld. Finally, Nico took out a small silver knife, different from their Stygian iron weapons, and looked seriously at Harry. This next part is optional, but it will make the connection stronger. Blood of the living calls to the dead, especially when there's a familial connection. Just a few drops would help summon your parents specifically. Harry didn't hesitate. I want to do it. Nico nodded, looking both impressed and concerned by Harry's determination. It will hurt a little. I'll just prick your finger. I don't care if it hurts, Harry said firmly. I want to meet them. Nico carefully pricked Harry's index finger with the knife. 3 drops of blood fell onto the obsidian sand, where they sizzled slightly before disappearing. Now we begin, Nico said, placing the knife aside. Repeat after me, I call to the spirits of James and Lily Potter, by blood and by name, cross the boundary between life and death to speak with your son. Harry repeated the words, feeling a strange energy build around him as he spoke. The air in the room grew colder, and the shadows in the corners seemed to deepen and shift. Now focus on your memories of them, anything you can recall, even if it's just feelings or impressions. Harry closed his eyes, concentrating. He didn't have true memories of his parents, but he had fragments, a flash of red hair, the sound of laughter, the feeling of being held securely in strong arms. And he had the whispers he'd heard in his darkest moments in the cupboard, his mother's voice telling him to be brave. The temperature in the room plummeted. Harry opened his eyes to see his breath fogging in the air. The obsidian sand in the pit began to swirl, forming a miniature whirlpool with the honey bowl at its center. Shadows from around the room flowed toward the pit like water down a drain. And then, slowly, 2 figures began to take shape above the sand. At first, they were just vague human outlines made of shadow and mist. But as Harry watched, transfixed, they solidified into the forms of a man and a woman. The man was tall and lean with messy black hair just like Harry's. He wore round glasses and had an expression of perpetual amusement, even in his spectral form. The woman had long red hair that seemed to float as if underwater and eyes, Harry realized with a jolt, exactly the same shade of green as his own. Harry, the woman's ghost said, her voice echoing as if coming from far away. My boy. Mum. Harry whispered, tears filling his eyes. Dad. James Potter's spirit moved closer to the edge of the pit, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. Look at you, he said, his voice similarly distant and echoing. So big already. I'm 5, Harry said, wiping away tears. Almost 6. Lily's spirit reached out as if to touch his face, though her hand stopped at the boundary of the protective circle. My brave, wonderful boy. We've been watching over you, but it's been so hard to reach you. I heard you sometimes, Harry told her. When I was scared in the cupboard. You told me to be brave. Anger flashed across both spirits' faces at the mention of the cupboard. Those terrible people, Lily hissed, her form briefly flaring brighter with emotion. My own sister. We never wanted you to go to them. You're away from them now, James said, looking at Nico with what appeared to be gratitude. Son of Hades. You have our eternal thanks for rescuing our boy. Nico inclined his head respectfully. He's special. He has powers like mine, though I'm still trying to understand exactly how that's possible. It's because of how I died, Lily explained, her form fluctuating slightly as she spoke. I used an ancient protection spell, blood magic mixed with soul magic. I knew Voldemort was coming for us, for Harry specifically. The spell required a willing sacrifice. You died to save me? Harry asked, his voice small. In a heartbeat, Lily said fiercely. Any mother would. But the particular spell I used created a connection between you and death itself. When Voldemort's killing curse hit you, the protection activated and rebounded the curse, but it also left a mark on your soul, a sensitivity to death magic that most wizards never develop. So I'm not really a son of Hades? Harry asked, looking at Nico. James chuckled, the sound oddly hollow coming from a spirit. No, though I'm flattered by the comparison. I was a pure-blood wizard from a long line of wizards. No divine blood in me. But the death magic is real, Lily added. And it makes you unique, Harry. A wizard with necromantic abilities is virtually unheard of. The magical community won't know what to make of you. Which might be for the best, Nico interjected. I've been doing some research. The British wizarding world seems conservative in its views. They might not react well to a necromancer in their midst, even if he is their celebrated boy who lived. Listen to Nico, James said seriously. The wizarding world can be wonderful, but it's also prejudiced and stuck in its ways. They divide magic into light and dark categories that have more to do with tradition than actual morality. And your abilities will definitely be classified as dark, Lily added. Not because they're evil, but because they deal with death, which wizards fear above all else. Harry tried to take all this in, looking between his parents' spirits and Nico. So what should I do? Not go to wizard school when I'm older? No, you should definitely go to Hogwarts, James said. It's your heritage, and you'll need to learn to control your wizard magic too. Just, be careful who you trust with the full extent of your abilities. We don't have much time, Lily said suddenly, her form beginning to flicker. Maintaining this connection is draining, even with the offerings and blood. Will I see you again? Harry asked desperately. Yes, Lily promised. Now that the connection has been established, it will be easier next time. And as your powers grow, you'll be able to summon us on your own. Harry, James said urgently as both spirits began to fade, there's something important you need to know. Voldemort isn't truly dead. The killing curse destroyed his body, but he took steps to ensure his spirit couldn't pass on. He's out there, somewhere, waiting to return. And he'll come for you again when he does, Lily added, her voice growing fainter. Be prepared. Be strong. Remember that we love you, always. I love you too, Harry said, tears streaming down his face. Please don't go. But the spirits were already dissipating, returning to the underworld. The last thing Harry saw was his mother's loving smile and his father's proud gaze before they vanished completely, leaving only ordinary shadows and still sand in the pit. For a long moment, neither Harry nor Nico spoke. The room gradually returned to its normal temperature, and the heavy energy of the summoning dissipated. They're really gone, Harry whispered finally. Nico placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Not gone. Just on the other side. And you'll speak to them again, I promise. Harry nodded, wiping away his tears. Despite the sadness of saying goodbye, he felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had been lifted. They loved me, he said, wonder in his voice. They didn't die in a car crash. They died protecting me. They still love you, Nico corrected. Death doesn't end love. If anything, it makes it purer because all the petty, everyday distractions are stripped away, leaving only the essence. Harry thought about this, then asked the question that had been forming in his mind since the spirits faded. Nico? My mum said Voldemort isn't really dead. That he'll come back and come after me again. What did she mean? Nico sighed, looking troubled. There are ways for powerful magic users to tether their spirits to the mortal world, preventing them from moving on to judgment in the underworld. It's extremely dark magic, not dark in the way necromancy is dark, but truly corrupted. It sounds like this Voldemort performed such rituals. So he's a ghost? Not exactly. A ghost has accepted death but chosen to remain in the mortal world. From what your father said, Voldemort rejected death entirely. His spirit is probably disembodied but intact, perhaps possessing creatures or even humans to survive. Eventually, he'll try to regain a proper body. And then he'll come for me, Harry said, a chill running down his spine despite the room having returned to its normal temperature. Yes, Nico said, not sugarcoating it. Which is why we need to train you to be ready. Both your wizard magic and your necromancy. When he returns, he'll be expecting to face a wizard, not a necromancer who can command the very forces of death he tried to cheat. Harry nodded, a new determination filling him. Then we'd better get started. I want to be ready. Nico smiled, recognizing the fierce look in Harry's eyes, the same look he'd seen in James and Lily's spirits. The boy might not be a true demigod, but he had the heart of a hero. We'll start with more shadow manipulation this afternoon, he said. Then tomorrow, we'll visit Diagon Alley. It's time you learned about the wizarding world too. As they left the summoning room, Harry felt changed. The reality of his parents' sacrifice, the revelation of his unique magical nature, and the warning about Voldemort's eventual return had transformed something inside him. He was no longer just a frightened boy rescued from a cupboard. He was Harry Potter, wizard and necromancer, with a destiny to face. And for the first time in his young life, he felt ready to embrace it. Chapter 2, Hogwarts and Hades. 6 years of training with a son of Hades changes a person. Harry Potter stood in the center of the training room, sweat dripping down his face despite the perpetual coolness of Nico's underground home. At 11, almost 12, he was still small for his age, but the scared little boy from the cupboard had vanished completely. In his place stood a focused young necromancer with shadows literally dancing at his fingertips. Again, Nico commanded from where he leaned against the wall. And this time, make them solid enough to actually do damage. Harry nodded, taking a deep breath. He extended his hands, calling to the darkness that always lurked at the edges of his awareness. Shadows peeled away from the corners of the room, rushing toward him like eager pets. They swirled around his body, then shot outward at his command, forming razor-sharp tendrils that sliced through the training dummies Nico had set up. One dummy's head fell to the floor with a satisfying thunk. Better, Nico said with a hint of a smile. You're still telegraphing your moves, though. Shadow manipulation should be instantaneous, thought to action with no pause between. I'm trying, Harry said, wiping his brow. It's harder when I have to make them solid enough to cut through stuff. I know. But you're getting there. 6 months ago, you couldn't even form solid shadows at all. Harry grinned at the praise. From Nico, "You're getting there," was practically a standing ovation. Over the past 6 years, Nico's underground sanctuary had become truly home. The cave system had expanded as Harry grew, new rooms appearing almost organically from the living stone. His bedroom had evolved from the cozy space he'd first slept into a larger chamber filled with books on both necromancy and wizardry, artifacts from their travels, and a bed that still felt luxurious compared to his cupboard days. The training room where they now stood was his favorite, though, a vast space with high ceilings perfect for shadow practice, weapon training, and even the occasional skeleton warrior summoning, though those still exhausted Harry more than he liked to admit. That's enough for today, Nico said, pushing away from the wall. You've got that history essay to finish for tomorrow. Harry groaned. Magical history is so boring compared to actual magic. Maybe, but you need to understand where you come from. Both sides of your heritage. That was the balance they'd struck over the years. Mornings were dedicated to necromantic training, shadow manipulation, spirit communication, death sense enhancement. Afternoons were for wizarding studies, magical theory, potion basics, and history of the wizarding world. Harry couldn't perform actual wizard magic yet without a wand, but Nico had insisted he learn everything else. Fine, Harry sighed dramatically. But after dinner, can we try the skeleton summon again? I almost got 3 last time. One thing at a time, Shadow Boy, Nico said with a chuckle. Go hit the shower. You smell like the fields of punishment. Harry stuck out his tongue but headed for the bathroom. As the hot water washed away the sweat of training, he reflected on how much his life had changed. From a neglected, abused child who didn't even know magic existed to a young necromancer who could command shadows and speak with the dead. It still felt surreal sometimes. His regular conversations with his parents' spirits had become a cornerstone of his life. James told him stories about Hogwarts and the magical world, while Lily explained magical theory and helped with his wizard studies. They couldn't stay for long each time. Maintaining a connection to the mortal world was draining for spirits, but these conversations had given Harry something he'd never expected to have, a relationship with his parents. After showering, Harry headed to the kitchen, where he found Nico sorting through the day's mail. Most of it arrived via shadow courier, spirits who owed Nico favors and carried messages between the different mythological worlds. "Anything interesting?" Harry asked, grabbing an apple from the bowl on the counter. Nico didn't answer. He was staring at a thick envelope made of yellowish parchment, his expression unreadable. "Nico? What is it?" Wordlessly, Nico handed him the envelope. Harry's eyes widened when he saw the address written in emerald green ink, Mr. H. Potter, the second bedroom on the left, the underground sanctuary, location unplottable. "It's from Hogwarts," Harry breathed, turning the envelope over to see the purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. "But how? Your wards should have prevented them from finding me." "That's what I'd like to know," Nico said, frowning. "Those wards are designed to block even godly detection. The fact that Hogwarts found you anyway means their magic operates on principles entirely different from Greek or Roman systems." Harry carefully broke the seal and pulled out the letter. He read aloud, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confede, of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." Harry looked up from the letter, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's really happening," he said quietly. "I'm going to Hogwarts." Nico took the letter back, examining it with narrowed eyes. "We need to talk about this, Harry. I'm not sure attending Hogwarts is the best idea." "What? But we've been preparing for this for years. All those wizard history lessons, the magical theory. You always said I'd go when I turned 11. That was before I knew they could pierce my wards," Nico said, setting the letter down. "If they can find you here, what other protections might be useless? And don't forget what your parents warned us about. The wizarding world won't understand your necromancy. They'll fear it, fear you." Harry's excitement dimmed. He'd known this conversation was coming, but he'd hoped Nico would be more supportive. "I can hide that part of me," he argued. "Use just the wizard magic at school. You think it's that easy to compartmentalize your abilities? What happens when you're stressed or scared and the shadows respond automatically? What happens when you sense death and react to it while your classmates see nothing?" "I'll be careful," Harry insisted. "Besides, I need to learn proper wizard magic too. You said yourself I have both types of power, and they need to balance each other." Nico ran a hand through his hair, which he now wore longer than when Harry had first met him. At 22, he looked more like the god he was half descended from, lean, intense, with an aura of power that made even other demigods wary. "Let's call your parents," he said finally. "Get their perspective again before we decide." Harry nodded eagerly. Summoning his parents had become much easier over the years, to the point where he could now do it without Nico's help, though the results were stronger when they worked together. They moved to the summoning room, which had also evolved. The simple pit of obsidian sand had been replaced with an elegant sunken area lined with black marble. Runes carved into the floor enhanced spiritual connections, and pedestals around the edges held permanent offerings, enchanted flames that never went out, bowls of asphodel honey that never emptied, and crystals that stored spiritual energy. Harry sat cross-legged at the edge of the circle, Nico beside him. Together, they called to the shadows, extending their senses toward the underworld. Harry no longer needed to prick his finger for these summonings, his connection to his parents had strengthened to the point where intention alone was enough. The familiar chill filled the room as two figures materialized in the center of the circle, James and Lily Potter, looking just as they had the first time Harry had seen them, though their forms were clearer now, more detailed. Harry, Nico, Lily greeted them warmly. "This is sooner than we expected. Is everything all right?" Harry held up the Hogwarts letter. It came. James's spirit moved closer, examining the letter with a proud smile. Just as it should. A Potter at Hogwarts once again. "The problem," Nico interjected, "is that the letter found him despite my protective wards. Wards that should have hidden him from any magical detection." Lily frowned. "The Hogwarts quill is ancient magic, older than the school itself. It detects and records the birth of every magical child in Britain. Your wards might hide Harry's location from scrying or tracking spells, but the quill already knew he existed." "But how did they find the exact location?" Nico pressed. "The address is remarkably specific. That would be the addressing charm on the envelopes," James explained. "It's tied to the student, not the location. The magic follows the essence of the person, not physical coordinates. Which means other wizard magic might be able to do the same," Nico concluded grimly. "Possibly," Lily admitted. "Wizard magic operates on different principles than divine or demigod abilities. They don't cancel each other out, they exist in parallel." "All the more reason Harry should stay here where it's safe," Nico argued. "No," James said firmly. "Harry needs Hogwarts. He's not just a necromancer, he's a wizard. Without proper training in that side of his abilities, he'll never reach his full potential. And if his necromancy is exposed?" Nico countered. "From what you've told us, wizards fear death magic above all else. They'll label him dark, dangerous. That's a risk we have to take," Lily said softly. "Harry can learn discretion. And the benefits outweigh the dangers. He needs friends his own age, connections to the world he'll eventually have to face fully." "Voldemort," Harry said quietly. All three adults looked at him, momentarily silent. "Yes," Lily finally responded. "Voldemort will return. When he does, Harry will need every advantage, both his wizard training and his necromantic abilities." "I want to go," Harry stated, meeting Nico's gaze directly. "I need to go. Not just for the magic, but to understand that part of who I am." Nico held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "I knew you'd say that. Stubborn just like your parents." James grinned. "He gets that from Lily." "Excuse me?" Lily objected, though her spectral form glimmered with amusement. "You were the definition of stubborn." Harry watched their banter with a smile. These moments, when they acted like a normal family despite the extraordinary circumstances, were precious to him. "Fine," Nico conceded. "But we set ground rules. You don't reveal your necromantic abilities to anyone. You check in regularly. And at the first sign of serious trouble, you shadow travel out of there, school rules be damned." "Deal," Harry agreed quickly before Nico could add more conditions. "There's something else we should discuss," Lily said, her expression growing serious. "Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster?" Harry asked. James nodded. "He's the most powerful wizard alive, and he'll take a special interest in you, Harry. He was deeply involved in the fight against Voldemort, and he arranged for your placement with the Dursleys." "He what?" Harry's voice dropped, shadows instinctively darkening around him. "He believed blood protection would keep you safe," Lily explained, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely agree with this logic. "My sacrifice created a powerful protection based on blood. As my sister, Petunia carried enough of that blood connection to anchor the wards Dumbledore placed. So he's the reason I was stuck in that cupboard for years. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as Harry's anger flared. Be careful, Nico warned. Your emotions affect your powers. Control them, don't let them control you. Harry took a deep breath, forcing the shadows to recede. Dumbledore is neither hero nor villain, James said carefully. He's a man carrying enormous burdens who sometimes loses sight of individual suffering in pursuit of what he believes is the greater good. He'll try to guide you, influence you, Lily added. Be respectful but cautious. Form your own judgments. I will, Harry promised. They discussed practicalities then, books, supplies, the platform at King's Cross, what to expect on his first day. By the time his parents' spirits began to fade, indicating they needed to return to the underworld, Harry felt both excited and nervous about what lay ahead. We're so proud of you, Lily said as her form grew translucent. Give them hell, son, James added with a wink. But, you know, not literally. After they vanished, Harry and Nico remained sitting by the summoning circle. We should visit Diagon Alley tomorrow, Nico said finally. Get your school supplies. Really? Harry perked up. Yes, really. If you're going to Hogwarts, you're going properly equipped. Nico stood, offering Harry a hand up. And we'll need to decide what to do about your existing weapons and necromantic tools. I'm bringing them, Harry said firmly. Hidden, of course. Of course, Nico echoed with a slight smirk. Now let's write a response to that letter. Do we even have an owl? We could send a shadow messenger. I think in this case, we should follow their traditions. We'll pick up an owl in Diagon Alley tomorrow. Harry grinned, the reality finally sinking in. He was going to Hogwarts. He was going to be a proper wizard. And no one there would have any idea that he was also training to be the first necromancer in the wizarding world in centuries. Diagon Alley hadn't changed much since Harry's first visit 6 years ago. The narrow, cobbled street still twisted and turned out of sight, lined with fascinating shops selling everything from cauldrons to racing brooms. But this time, Harry wasn't just a visitor, he was a customer, a soon-to-be Hogwarts student. Remember to keep a low profile, Nico murmured as they emerged from the shadow of Gringotts Bank, where they just visited Harry's family vault. The boy who lived returning to the wizarding world would cause quite a stir. Harry adjusted the simple glamour they'd placed over his scar, not enough to change his appearance completely, but sufficient to make the lightning bolt less noticeable. I know. No announcing my name or challenging people to duels, Harry replied with a grin. Nico rolled his eyes. Your father's humor is hereditary, I see. Their first stop was Madame Malkin's for school robes. The squat, smiling witch greeted them warmly and directed Harry to stand on a stool while a second witch began pinning up a long black robe to the right length. Harry was just getting fitted when another boy entered the shop. He was pale with a pointed face and white blonde hair slicked back from his forehead. Something about his bearing screamed, entitled. Hogwarts too? The boy asked as he took the stool next to Harry. Yes, Harry replied simply, remembering his promise to keep a low profile. My father's next door buying my books and mother's up the street looking at wands, the boy drawled in a bored voice. Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one and I'll smuggle it in somehow. Harry immediately disliked him. The boy reminded him too much of Dudley, expecting to get whatever he wanted just by demanding it. Have you got your own broom? The boy continued. Not yet, Harry said. Play Quidditch at all? No. Though Harry knew the rules from his father's stories, he'd never had the opportunity to actually play. I do, father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say, I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet? Harry resisted the urge to roll his eyes. No one knows until they get there. Well, no one really knows until they're sorted, but I know I'll be in Slytherin, all our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you? Before Harry could answer, the boy's attention shifted to the front of the shop where Nico stood, examining a display of dress robes with clear distaste. Who's that with you? Doesn't look like a wizard. Is he your servant? Harry felt a cold surge of anger, shadows instinctively darkening around his feet. That's my guardian, he said coldly. And he's more powerful than most wizards could ever dream of being. The blonde boy looked taken aback by Harry's tone. No need to get snippy. I was just asking. Doesn't look like he shops here often, is all. That's you done, dear, the witch-fitting Harry said before the conversation could deteriorate further. Harry hopped down from the stool, glad for the excuse to end the interaction. See you at Hogwarts, I suppose, the blonde boy called after him. Outside the shop, Nico raised an eyebrow at Harry's stormy expression. Problem? Just met my first wizard kid. Reminded me of Dudley, but somehow even more entitled. There'll be all types at Hogwarts, Nico said. Just like at Camp Half-Blood. Harry had visited the demigod camp a few times over the years when Nico needed to check in with Chiron or his friends. While Harry wasn't a true demigod, Nico's status and Mr. D's general indifference had allowed him entry. The experience had prepared him somewhat for the idea of living with magical peers. Where to next? Harry asked, pushing thoughts of the blonde boy aside. Wand, Nico said decisively. Everything else is just stuff. Your wand is what will connect you to your wizard magic. Ollivander's was narrow and shabby, with a sign over the door reading, Ollivander's, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A bell jingled as they entered the dusty shop. Harry felt an immediate tingle of magic, different from the necromantic energy he was accustomed to, but undeniably powerful. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. An old man stepped out of the shadows, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom. Hello, Harry said awkwardly. Ah yes, the man said. Yes, yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. Harry glanced at Nico, who tensed beside him. You have your mother's eyes, Ollivander continued. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10¼ inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. The man moved closer, and Harry resisted the urge to step back. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches. Pliable. A little more power and excellent for transfiguration. Ollivander was now so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. And that's where. The wand maker brushed aside the glamour covering Harry's scar as if it were nothing more than a cobweb. Nico stepped forward, his hand moving to where Harry knew he kept his Stygian iron sword. I've sold many wands, Mr. Di Angelo, Ollivander said without looking away from Harry. To wizards, yes, but also to those who walk between worlds. Your kind have their own magic, but sometimes seek out wandcraft as well. Nico froze. You know who I am. I know what you are, Ollivander corrected. Just as I know young Mr. Potter here is more than simply the boy who lived. He carries a shadow within him that most wizards would not recognize. Harry swallowed nervously. Sir, your secrets are safe with me, the old wand maker said, finally stepping back. Now, let's find you a wand. Or rather, let the wand find you. What followed was a bewildering process of trying wand after wand. Ollivander would hand Harry a wand, Harry would wave it, and before he could do more than raise it, Ollivander would snatch it back, muttering to himself. The pile of tried wands grew higher, but Ollivander seemed to become more excited with each failure. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere, I wonder, now, yes, why not, unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Harry took the wand, and immediately felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. When he raised the wand above his head and brought it swishing down, a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like fireworks. What Ollivander couldn't see, but Harry could feel, was that the sparks were accompanied by tiny shadow tendrils that quickly dissipated in the wand light. "Oh, bravo!" Ollivander cried. "Yes, indeed, very good." "Well, well, well, how curious, how very curious." "What's curious?" Harry asked. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand, gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar." Harry felt a chill run down his spine. "Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I had known what that wand was going out into the world to do." "You couldn't have known," Harry said quietly. "But now I see why this wand chose you," Ollivander continued, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Your magic is complex, Mr. Potter. The wizard part seeks its twin, drawn to that connection with Voldemort. But the shadow part, that part that walks close to death, that is what the holly responds to. Holly, traditionally a wood of protection, especially potent against evil spirits and lightning, most unusual for one with your particular talents." Nico stepped forward. "I think that's enough, Mr. Ollivander." The wand maker nodded, wrapping the wand in brown paper. 7 galleons. As they left the shop, Harry could feel the old man's silvery eyes following them. "That was unsettling," Harry murmured as they stepped back into the sunlight. "He saw too much," Nico agreed. "But I don't think he'll tell anyone. Wand makers have their own code of ethics about customer privacy." "He knew about you, about demigods," Harry pointed out. "Ollivander's shop has been around since before the Roman Empire. I'm not surprised he's encountered demigods before." Nico glanced at the wrapped wand in Harry's hand. "More concerning is your wand's connection to Voldemort's." "Twin cores," Harry said. "Does that mean something specific in wizard magic?" "I'm not sure. But magical connections like that are rarely coincidences. We should research it more before you leave for Hogwarts." They spent the rest of the afternoon gathering the remaining items from Harry's school list: pewter cauldron, brass scales, telescope, and basic potion ingredients. At Flourish and Blots, Nico insisted on purchasing additional books beyond the required texts, Advanced Defensive Magic, Magical Theory, and Wizard Genealogy to help Harry understand the complex social dynamics he'd be entering. Their final stop was Elop's Owl Emporium, where after much deliberation, Harry selected a beautiful snowy owl. "What will you name her?" Nico asked as they left the shop, the owl dozing contentedly in her cage. Harry considered for a moment. "Hedwig. I found the name in a history of magic. She was a witch who took care of orphan children during a plague." Nico smiled, one of his rare genuine smiles that transformed his usually serious face. "It suits her." As they headed toward the leaky cauldron, planning to find a quiet alley for shadow travel home, Harry spotted a familiar face coming out of Quality Quidditch Supplies, the blonde boy from Madame Malkin's, now accompanied by a tall man with the same pointed face and long, white blonde hair. "That's the boy I told you about," Harry whispered to Nico. "The entitled one." Nico followed his gaze, then stiffened. "That's Lucius Malfoy with him. Your father mentioned him, a Death Eater who claimed to be under the Imperius curse after Voldemort's fall. Not someone we want to tangle with today." They altered their course to avoid the Malfoys, but not before the elder Malfoy's cold grey eyes flicked in their direction, a slight frown crossing his aristocratic features as if trying to place Harry's face. "Time to go," Nico muttered, pulling Harry into the nearest shadowed doorway. A moment later, they melted into the darkness, leaving Diagon Alley behind. The weeks leading up to September 1st passed in a blur of preparation. Harry divided his time between studying his new schoolbooks, practicing basic wand movements, though he couldn't perform actual spells outside of Hogwarts without triggering the trace, and continuing his necromantic training with Nico. "You'll need to be extra careful at Hogwarts," Nico reminded him during one of their final training sessions. "No shadow travel where anyone can see you. No communicating with spirits unless you're absolutely alone and warded." "I know," Harry said, carefully manipulating a shadow into the shape of a small bird that flew around his head before dissolving. "I've got the control down. Watch." He demonstrated by allowing shadows to subtly darken around him, then instantly returning them to normal brightness, the kind of fine control that had taken years to master. "It's not just control I'm worried about," Nico said. "It's instinct. When you're threatened or frightened, your necromantic abilities respond automatically, faster than your conscious mind. That's harder to suppress." "I've been practicing the compartmentalization techniques," Harry assured him. "The mental walls between wizard magic and death magic." "Good. You'll need them." Nico hesitated, then added, "I've arranged a backup in case of emergencies." "What kind of backup?" "Magical communication. This isn't an iris message or wizard spell, it's underworld magic." Nico handed Harry a small, black stone engraved with a symbol that resembled a stylized key. "If you're in serious danger, hold this and call my name 3 times while focusing on your death sense. It'll create a temporary portal between us, allowing communication regardless of distance. Like a magical phone call. Something like that. Use it only in emergencies, the energy cost is significant." Harry slipped the stone into his pocket, touched by Nico's concern. Their relationship had evolved over the years from rescuer and rescued to something like brothers, though Nico maintained enough authority to keep Harry in line when needed. "I'll miss this," Harry admitted, gesturing around the training room. "And you?" Nico looked uncomfortable, as he always did with direct emotional statements. "You'll be back for holidays. And I might visit occasionally. Hogwarts has plenty of shadows to travel through." The day of departure arrived with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Harry had packed and repacked his trunk several times, ensuring his wizard supplies were neatly organized on top while his necromantic tools, bone chalk, ceremonial dagger, specialized crystals, and his personal grimoire of shadow magic, were hidden in a secret compartment Nico had built into the trunk's bottom. His Stygian iron dagger, now matched with a celestial bronze companion piece for dealing with different types of entities, were concealed in specially crafted holsters that strapped to his forearms under his robes. "Ready?" Nico asked, standing by the door with Hedwig's cage. The snowy owl had quickly become attached to Harry, proving to be intelligent and affectionate. "As I'll ever be," Harry replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. They shadow traveled to an alley near King's Cross Station, then walked casually into the busy terminal with Harry's trunk on a cart and Hedwig's cage balanced on top. "Platform 9 3/4 is this way," Nico said, guiding him toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. "Your father explained how to access it, you just walk straight at the barrier without stopping." Harry nodded, remembering his father's stories. As they approached, he noticed a family of redheads ahead of them, the mother speaking loudly about muggles and the platform, clearly a wizarding family helping their children board the train. "We could ask them for help," Harry suggested. "Might be a good way to make an initial connection." Nico considered the family, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The Weasleys, I think, based on your father's descriptions. Good people, from what I've heard. Very much on the light side of magic, though. So maybe not the first people I should reveal my necromancy to," Harry said with a wry smile. "Definitely not. But as wizard connections go, they'd be valuable allies." They waited until most of the Weasley family had passed through the barrier, then approached the plump, kind-faced mother who remained with her youngest son and a small red-haired girl. "Excuse me," Harry said politely. "I'm new to this. Could you show me how to?" He gestured toward the barrier. "How to get onto the platform," she said kindly. "Not to worry, dear. It's Ron's first time to Hogwarts as well." She pointed to her son, a tall, thin boy with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. All you have to do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop and don't be scared you'll crash into it, that's very important. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on, go now before Ron. Thank you, Harry said with a grateful smile. He looked at Nico. See you on the other side? Nico nodded, his expression softening slightly. Go ahead. Harry positioned his cart, took a deep breath, and walked briskly toward the barrier. As he reached what should have been solid brick, he felt a slight tingling sensation, and suddenly he was standing on a crowded platform next to a scarlet steam engine. A sign overhead read, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Nico appeared beside him a moment later, surveying the scene with the slight wariness he always displayed in crowds. Impressive, he murmured. Wizard spacefolding magic at work. Different from our shadow paths, but effective. They found an empty compartment near the end of the train, and Nico helped Harry load his trunk onto the rack. As the final boarding call sounded, Nico placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Remember everything we've practiced, he said quietly. And remember who you are, all of who you are. I will, Harry promised. Write to me with Hedwig. And if anything serious happens, black stone, 3 calls, death sentence. I know. Nico nodded, looking unusually emotional. Good luck, Harry Potter. With a final squeeze of Harry's shoulder, Nico stepped back onto the platform. As the train began to move, Harry leaned out the window, waving until Nico's figure blended with the crowd and disappeared from view. Harry had just settled into his seat when the compartment door slid open and the red-headed boy from the platform stood there. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Go ahead, Harry said, gesturing to the empty seat. The boy sat down, glancing curiously at Harry before looking quickly out the window. Harry noticed a black mark on his nose. I'm Ron, by the way, he said. Ron Weasley. Harry Potter, Harry replied, deciding there was no point in hiding his identity from someone he'd be living with all year. Ron gaped at him. Are you really? I mean, do you have the... Harry lifted his fringe to show the lightning-shaped scar. Wicked, Ron breathed. So that's where you know who, you know. Tried to kill me. Yeah. Do you remember it? Ron asked eagerly, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, you probably don't want to talk about it. It's all right, Harry said. I don't remember much. Just a lot of green light. That wasn't entirely true. Through his necromantic connection to spirits, he'd gathered more impressions of that night than most would expect, but those weren't details he was ready to share. Their conversation was interrupted when the compartment door slid open again. This time it was a girl with lots of bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, she said in a bossy sort of voice. No toads here, Ron replied. The girl wasn't listening. She was looking at Harry with sudden interest. Are you Harry Potter? She asked. I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Am I? Harry said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by her rapid speech. Goodness, didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me, she said. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. And you are? She looked at Ron. Ron Weasley, he muttered. Pleasure, she said briskly. You two better change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon. After she left, Ron made a face. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it. What house do you think you'll be in? Harry asked. Gryffindor, probably. My whole family's been there. Imagine if they put me in Slytherin, though. He shuddered. What's wrong with Slytherin? Harry asked, remembering his father had been in Gryffindor but his mother had nearly been sorted into Slytherin. That's the house all the dark wizards come from, Ron explained. You know who was in Slytherin? Harry frowned slightly. I don't think a whole house could be evil. That doesn't make sense. Ron looked surprised at this perspective. Well, maybe not everyone, but most of them are pretty nasty. At least, that's what my brothers say. Their conversation continued as the train carried them north, covering everything from wizard families to Quidditch. Harry found himself warming to Ron, who despite some prejudices seemed genuinely friendly and straightforward. The countryside outside became wilder as the daylight began to fade. Forests, twisting rivers, and dark green hills rolled past. As the train slowed, a voice echoed through the train, "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves. This was it, his entrance into the wizarding world proper. Everything until now had been preparation, this was the real beginning. The train slowed to a stop at a tiny, dark platform. As Harry stepped out into the cold night air, he heard a familiar name from his parents' stories. Fur's Years. Fur's Years over here. All right there, Harry. Hagrid's big hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. Harry smiled back, recognizing the half-giant from his parents' descriptions. According to them, Hagrid had been the one to retrieve Harry from the ruined house in Godric's Hollow the night his parents were killed. Come on, follow me, any more Fur's Years? Mind your step, now. Fur's Years follow me. Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down a steep, narrow path. Nobody spoke much. A boy Harry assumed must be Neville sniffed once or twice, still mourning his lost toad. Yell get your Fur's sight Hogwarts in a sec, Hagrid called over his shoulder, just round this bend here. There was a loud boo-hoo. The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. But while the other students gaped at the castle, Harry found his attention drawn elsewhere. His necromantic senses, which had developed to acute sensitivity over years of training, detected something unexpected, a strong concentration of death energy emanating from the castle. No more N4 to a boat. Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were joined in their boat by Hermione and Neville. As they glided across the lake, Harry extended his death sense, trying to pinpoint the source of the energy he was detecting. It was different from anything he'd encountered before, not quite spirits, not quite the energy of recent death, but something ancient and profound. When the fleet of boats reached an underground harbor beneath the castle, Harry was still distracted by his supernatural senses. You okay, Harry? Ron asked as they clambered out of the boat. You look a bit peaky. I'm fine, Harry assured him, pulling his awareness back to the physical world. Just nervous. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge, oak front door. Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times. The door swung open at once to reveal a tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes with a very stern face. The Fur's Years, Professor McGonagall, said Hagrid. Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here. She led them through the entrance hall, a space so vast Harry thought Nico's entire underground sanctuary could have fit inside it, and into a small, empty chamber off the hall. Welcome to Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall said. The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. As she explained the house system, Harry found his attention pulled once again to the death energy he was sensing. It seemed to be coming from all around them, as if the very stones of the castle were imbued with it. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school, Professor McGonagall concluded. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting. When she left, the chamber burst into nervous chatter. How exactly do they sort us into houses? Harry asked Ron. Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Harry smiled slightly, doubting that 11-year-olds would be subjected to painful trials. His father had never mentioned the exact method of sorting, saying it was a tradition for first years to be surprised. Several people behind Harry screamed, and he turned to see about 20 ghosts streaming through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room talking to one another, hardly glancing at the first years. What the other students couldn't see, but Harry could, thanks to his necromantic vision, was the complex network of spiritual energy anchoring these ghosts to the mortal world. Unlike the free-roaming spirits he normally communicated with, these ghosts were permanently tethered to Hogwarts itself. As the ghosts passed, several of them looked at Harry with surprise, as if sensing something unusual about him. A ghost wearing a ruff and tights actually stopped, staring at Harry with an expression of astonishment. "I say, what?" the ghost began, but was interrupted by Professor McGonagall's return. "Move along now," she said sharply to the ghosts. "The sorting ceremony's about to start." The ghosts floated away through the opposite wall, though the one in the ruff kept looking back at Harry with confused interest. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall instructed the first years, "and follow me." Harry got into line behind Ron, with Hermione behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. The vast room was lit by thousands of candles floating in midair over 4 long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers sat. Professor McGonagall led the first years up to this table, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. Harry glanced up at the ceiling, which his father had described as being bewitched to look like the sky outside. Indeed, it appeared as if the hall opened directly to the heavens, velvety black and dotted with stars. Harry's gaze was drawn to the teacher's table. At the center sat Albus Dumbledore, easily recognizable from his father's descriptions, long silver beard, half-moon spectacles, and an air of calm power. But it was another teacher who captured Harry's full attention, a thin man with sallow skin and a hooked nose, dressed entirely in black. The moment Harry looked at him, a sharp pain shot through his scar, accompanied by a surge in his death sense. There was something wrong about that teacher, something that triggered both Harry's wizard scar and his necromantic abilities. Before he could analyze the sensation further, Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool she put a pointed wizard's hat, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. The hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing a song about the 4 houses and their qualities. When it finished, the hall burst into applause. "So we've just got to try on the hat," Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred," he was going on about wrestling a troll. Professor McGonagall stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Abbott, Hannah." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, and sat down. A moment's pause, Hufflepuff, shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered as Hannah went to sit with them. Harry watched as, one by one, terrified-looking students approached the stool and were sorted. Granger, Hermione, became a Gryffindor, to Ron's dismay, while the unpleasant blonde boy from Diagon Alley, now identified as Malfoy, Draco, was immediately declared a Slytherin. Then, at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" Harry sat on the stool, and the last thing he saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. The next second he was looking at the black inside of the hat, waiting. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. But what's this? Oh my, how unusual, a connection to death itself, shadows and spirits. I haven't seen abilities like these in centuries. Harry tensed. He hadn't expected the hat to detect his necromantic powers. Don't worry, the hat whispered, your secrets are safe with me. I'm bound to keep students' confidences. But where to put you? With your particular talents. Slytherin could help you to greatness, no doubt about that. Not Slytherin, Harry thought quickly. While he didn't share Ron's prejudice against the house, he knew from his parents that Voldemort's remaining supporters would be connected to Slytherin, making it a potentially dangerous environment for him. Not Slytherin, eh? Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No. Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. The hat shouted the last word to the entire hall. Harry took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table, where he was greeted by the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" As Harry sat down, he caught sight of the high table properly. Hagrid gave him a thumbs up. Albus Dumbledore was watching him with a penetrating gaze that made Harry wonder if the headmaster could somehow sense his dual nature as well. And the hook-nosed teacher in black was staring at him with an expression that combined shock, bitterness, and something that looked oddly like grief. Harry's scar gave another painful twinge, and his death sense prickled uncomfortably. There was definitely something strange about that teacher, something he'd need to investigate. Ron joined him at the Gryffindor table a few minutes later, looking relieved. The sorting concluded with Zabini, Blaise, becoming a Slytherin, and Dumbledore rose to his feet. "Welcome," he said, beaming at the students. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down as everybody clapped and cheered. Harry raised an eyebrow, wondering if the headmaster was genuinely eccentric or if it was a carefully cultivated persona. His thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of food on the golden plates before them: roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, steak, potatoes, and vegetables of all kinds. As Harry helped himself to the feast, the ghost in the ruff he'd noticed earlier floated to sit beside him. "Welcome to Gryffindor," the ghost said formally. "I am Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower." "I know who you are," said Ron suddenly. "My brothers told me about you, you're nearly headless Nick." "I would prefer you to call me Sir Nicholas de, nearly headless," interrupted a sandy-haired boy named Seamus Finnegan. "How can you be nearly headless?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely irritated. "Like this," he said, and seized his left ear, pulling. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. While the other students reacted with shock or disgust, Harry studied the ghost with professional interest. The spectral energy holding Sir Nicholas's form together was different from what he'd observed in the underworld spirits, more coherent, more autonomous. When Sir Nicholas returned to his original position, his eyes met Harry's, and a look of confusion crossed his transparent face again. "You're an unusual one, Mr. Potter," he said quietly, while the other students were distracted by the food. "There's something about you that feels familiar, yet not. Almost like." "Like what?" Harry asked, careful to keep his voice low. The ghost hesitated. "Like you've stood closer to death than most living beings. But differently from how one might expect, given your history." Harry maintained his expression, neither confirming nor denying. "I've had unusual experiences." "Indeed," Sir Nicholas murmured. "Well, should you ever wish to discuss the nature of existence between states, I am at your disposal." "Thank you," Harry said sincerely. Having an ally among the ghosts could prove valuable. As dinner progressed to dessert, conversation turned to families and classes. When the last morsels of food had disappeared, Dumbledore got to his feet again to deliver start-of-term notices, including a stern warning that the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side was out of bounds to everyone who didn't wish to die a very painful death. That caught Harry's attention immediately. Was this related to the strange death energy he'd been sensing? He made a mental note to investigate, carefully. After singing the school song, they were dismissed to their dormitories. Percy led the Gryffindor first years through the chattering crowds, out of the great hall, and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs felt like lead, but not just from exhaustion and a full stomach. His necromantic senses had been on high alert all evening, constantly detecting the castle's ambient spiritual energy, and it was draining him faster than expected. They climbed more staircases until they reached a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. "Password?" she asked. "Caput Draconis," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy, round room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they found their beds at last, 5 four-posters hung with deep red, velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Harry, however, took a moment to ensure his trunk was positioned so that no one could easily access the hidden compartment. He also checked that his arm holsters with the Stygian iron and celestial bronze daggers were tucked safely under his mattress, easily accessible but out of sight. "Great food, isn't it?" Ron muttered sleepily through the curtains. "Get off, Scabbers. He's chewing my sheets." Harry was about to respond when something about Ron's pet rat caught his necromantic attention. There was a strange energy around the creature, almost human-like in its complexity, but twisted somehow, diminished. Frowning, Harry extended his death sense toward the rat more deliberately. What he perceived shocked him. This was no ordinary rat. Its life force was layered, as if one consciousness was wrapped around another, smaller one. Harry had never encountered anything like it before. "Ron," he started to say, then stopped himself. He couldn't exactly explain how he knew something was wrong with the rat. Not without revealing abilities he needed to keep secret. "Yeah." Ron mumbled, already half asleep. "Nothing. Just, good night." "Night, Harry." Harry lay back, his mind racing despite his physical exhaustion. His first day in the wizarding world had already presented multiple mysteries: the strange death energy throughout the castle, the hook-nosed teacher who triggered both his scar and death sense, the warning about the third-floor corridor, and now Ron's rat with its bizarrely layered life force. One thing was clear: Hogwarts was going to be far more complicated than simply learning to be a wizard while hiding his necromantic abilities. Something was happening here, something connected to death and possibly to Voldemort himself. As Harry drifted off to sleep, his last thought was that he should write to Nico as soon as possible. His mentor would want to know what he discovered, and might have insights that could help make sense of it all. Harry quickly fell into the routine of Hogwarts life, though not without challenges. Hiding his necromantic abilities proved more difficult than anticipated, especially when the castle itself seemed designed to trigger them. The ambient death energy he'd sensed upon arrival was omnipresent, strongest in the oldest parts of the castle and around certain artifacts. The ghosts presented another challenge. Though Harry was careful not to demonstrate unusual knowledge or abilities around them, they seemed instinctively drawn to him. Nearly headless Nick often appeared wherever Harry went, floating nearby with a curious expression. The Bloody Baron, Slytherin's intimidating ghost, would stare at Harry with narrowed eyes whenever they crossed paths, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Classes themselves were fascinating, if sometimes frustrating. Having studied magical theory extensively with Nico and through his mother's guidance, Harry found he had a solid theoretical foundation but lacked the practical experience of students raised in wizarding households. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall proved to be one of his stronger subjects. His ability to visualize magical energy flows, developed through years of shadow manipulation, translated well to the precise magical visualization required for transfiguration. Charms with tiny Professor Flitwick was enjoyable, though Harry had to be careful not to accidentally channel shadow energy when casting certain spells. The first time he performed Lumos, his wand emitted both light and tiny shadow tendrils that quickly dissipated. Fortunately, no one but Harry noticed. Herbology involved no direct spellcasting, making it a safe haven where Harry didn't need to monitor his magical output so carefully. He enjoyed working with the plants, finding parallels between certain underworld flora Nico had shown him and their non-necromantic counterparts in the greenhouses. History of Magic, taught by the ghost Professor Binns, was simultaneously the most and least comfortable class for Harry. On one hand, being surrounded by necromantic energy without having to hide his awareness of it was relaxing. On the other hand, Binns' droning lectures were painfully dull, and Harry had to suppress the urge to ask the ghost questions about his own existence rather than goblin rebellions. Defense against the dark arts should have been fascinating but was rendered nearly intolerable by Professor Quirrell's teaching style and, more significantly, the strange reaction Harry had to his presence. Every time Quirrell turned his back, Harry's scar would prickle painfully and his death sense would flare, detecting something wrong, something corrupted beneath the surface. The worst class by far was Potions with Professor Snape, who had turned out to be the hook-nosed teacher Harry had noticed at the feast. From the moment Harry entered the dungeon classroom, it was clear Snape despised him. "Ah, yes," Snape had said softly during the first roll call, "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." What followed was a public interrogation about advanced potion ingredients and techniques, clearly designed to humiliate Harry. Fortunately, thanks to his mother's spirit-guided tutoring in basic potions theory, Harry was able to answer at least some of the questions, though not to Snape's satisfaction. What confused Harry was the complexity of emotions his death sense detected from Snape, hatred and bitterness on the surface, but underneath, layers of grief, guilt, and what felt almost like twisted protection. It was as if Snape both loathed and felt obligated to Harry simultaneously. By the end of his first week, Harry had established a careful routine. During the day, he was Harry Potter, Gryffindor first year, friend to Ron Weasley and increasingly to Hermione Granger, despite Ron's initial resistance to her know-it-all tendencies. He focused on wizard magic, kept his head down in Snape's class, and tried to ignore the whispers that followed him everywhere. At night, once his dorm mates were asleep, he would silently cast the privacy wards Nico had taught him, then practice his necromancy. Simple exercises, manipulating the shadows between his bed curtains, extending his death sense to map the castle's spiritual landscape, or meditating to maintain his magical compartmentalization. He wrote to Nico regularly, using a simple cipher they developed to discuss necromantic matters without risking exposure if the letters were intercepted. Hedwig seemed to enjoy the frequent trips to and from Nico's sanctuary, always returning with thoughtful responses and occasionally small packages of specialized supplies Harry couldn't acquire at Hogwarts. The mystery of the third-floor corridor remained at the forefront of Harry's mind. His death sense consistently detected powerful energy emanating from that direction, though he hadn't yet found an opportunity to investigate without risking discovery. Ron's rat, Scabbers, continued to puzzle him as well. The layered life force was definitely not normal, but without revealing his abilities, Harry had no way to explain his suspicions to Ron or anyone else. Then there was Dumbledore. The headmaster rarely appeared at meals after the first night, but when he did, Harry often caught those piercing blue eyes studying him with an intensity that made him wonder just how much the old wizard perceived. It wasn't until flying lessons in the third week that events took a dramatic turn. The Gryffindors shared the class with the Slytherins, and tensions were high from the start. Draco Malfoy immediately began boasting about his flying prowess, while Neville Longbottom looked terrified at the prospect of leaving the ground. When Neville lost control of his broom and fell, breaking his wrist, Madame Hooch took him to the hospital wing, leaving the class with strict instructions to stay on the ground. Naturally, Malfoy immediately seized Neville's remembrall from where it had fallen and took to the air with it. "Give it here, Malfoy," Harry called, mounting his own broom despite Hermione's warnings. The feeling of flying was incredible, like shadow travel but with light and air instead of darkness and cold. Harry discovered he had a natural talent for it, easily matching Malfoy's movements high above the ground. "No Crabbe and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy," Harry taunted. "Catch it if you can, then," Malfoy shouted, throwing the glass ball high into the air before streaking back toward the ground. Harry saw the ball rise up and then start to fall. He leaned forward, pointing his broomstick handle down, and the next moment he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, his robes whipped out behind him, he stretched out his hand, a foot from the ground he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and toppled gently onto the grass with the Remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter. His heart sank faster than he'd just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them, her face white with shock. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts, she was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed furiously. "How dare you, might have broken your neck, it wasn't his fault, Professor, be quiet, Miss Patil, but Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me, now." Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled, he was sure of it. He'd have to shadow travel back to Nico's sanctuary in disgrace. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. To his surprise, however, McGonagall led him to a classroom, extracted a student named Oliver Wood, and proceeded to announce that she'd found Wood a seeker. Far from being punished, Harry was being recruited to the Gryffindor Quidditch team, the youngest seeker in a century. The news spread quickly, and by dinner, Harry found himself receiving congratulations from the Weasley twins, who were also on the team, and jealous glares from Malfoy. As Harry finished his meal, Malfoy approached the Gryffindor table, flanked as usual by Crabbe and Goyle. "Enjoying your last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you," said Harry coolly. "I'd take you on any time on my own," said Malfoy. "Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel. Wands only, no contact." "What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel before, I suppose?" "Of course he has," said Ron, wheeling around. "I'm his second, who's yours?" Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. "Crabbe. Midnight all right? We'll meet you in the trophy room, that's always unlocked." When Malfoy had gone, Ron began explaining wizard duels to Harry, while Hermione lectured them both on the foolishness of accepting the challenge. Harry only half listened. His instincts told him Malfoy was setting a trap, but he was also curious about what the blonde Slytherin might know regarding the mysteries of the castle. Perhaps this could be an opportunity to do some exploring while everyone else was asleep. That night, Harry and Ron snuck out of Gryffindor Tower, unwillingly accompanied by Hermione, who had tried to stop them and got locked out of the common room, and Neville, who had forgotten the password and was stranded in the corridor. As expected, Malfoy never showed at the trophy room. Instead, they nearly ran into Filch, clearly tipped off about students out of bed. Their escape route led them down an unfamiliar corridor, where they took refuge behind a locked door that Hermione opened with a quick "Alahomio." It wasn't until they were inside that they realized they'd stumbled into the forbidden third-floor corridor, and were face to face with a monstrous three-headed dog standing guard over a trapdoor. While Ron, Hermione, and Neville reacted with terror, Harry's response was more complex. His wizard instincts matched their fear, but his necromantic senses were overwhelmed by the death energy emanating not from the dog, but from whatever lay beneath the trapdoor it was guarding. The power was ancient, concentrated, and felt strangely familiar, though Harry couldn't place why. They escaped back to Gryffindor Tower, where Hermione immediately connected the dog to something being guarded. "Did you see what it was standing on?" she asked once they were safely back in the common room. "The floor," Ron suggested. "I wasn't looking at its feet, I was too busy with its heads." "No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something." Harry nodded, his mind racing. That explains Dumbledore's warning about painful death. But what could be so valuable or dangerous it needs that kind of protection? Whatever it is, Ron yawned, it must be really important. I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled. As the others headed up to the dormitories, Harry lingered in the common room, ostensibly staring into the fire but actually extending his death sense back toward the third-floor corridor. The energy he'd felt was unlike anything he'd encountered in his training with Nico, powerful, ancient, and somehow alive while simultaneously connected to death. He needed to investigate further, but carefully. Whatever lay beneath that trapdoor was clearly valuable enough to merit extreme protection, and based on the energy signature, potentially dangerous in ways even his necromantic training might not have prepared him for. As October arrived, bringing chilly weather and the start of Quidditch practice, Harry settled deeper into his dual life at Hogwarts. By day, he focused on classes, Quidditch, and building friendships with Ron and Hermione. By night, he continued his private necromantic practices and explored the castle using shadow travel when it was safe to do so. His investigation of the third-floor corridor had yielded limited results. The dog, which Hagrid later accidentally revealed was named Fluffy, guarded something Hagrid referred to as, between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel, though Harry couldn't immediately place the second name. What troubled Harry more was Professor Quirrell. During a solo exploration near the staff quarters, Harry had followed his death sense toward an unusual energy signature and witnessed Quirrell arguing with an unseen presence, his usually stuttering voice replaced by fearful whispers. When Quirrell had suddenly turned in Harry's direction, the pain in his scar had been so severe he'd nearly lost control of his shadow concealment. Harry had written to Nico about these developments, and his mentor's response had been immediate and concerned. Your description of the energy beneath the trapdoor sounds like an artifact of significant power, likely with necromantic properties. The connection to this Nicholas Flamel suggests alchemical work. Research him when you can. More concerning is your professor. The pain in your scar combined with the death energy you sense suggests a parasitic spiritual attachment, possibly possession. Exercise extreme caution around him. If the presence is what we both suspect, direct confrontation would be dangerous at your current level of training. Harry took this warning seriously, keeping his distance from Quirrell whenever possible and strengthening his mental compartmentalization to protect against whatever might be causing his scar's reactions. By Halloween, Harry had developed a comfortable rhythm to his secret practices. Late at night, he would sometimes shadow travel to unused classrooms or hidden passages to practice more advanced necromancy than was safe in the dormitory. During one such session in an abandoned dungeon chamber, he managed to summon and maintain a small skeletal mouse for nearly 10 minutes, his first successful animation at Hogwarts. The Halloween feast itself was spectacular, with thousands of live bats fluttering from the walls and ceiling and enormous pumpkins carved into lanterns. Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know." He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. The hall erupted into chaos until Dumbledore set off magical fireworks from his wand and ordered prefects to lead their houses back to dormitories while teachers went to the dungeons. As Percy led the Gryffindors upstairs, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. "Hermione. She doesn't know about the troll, she's been in the bathroom crying all afternoon." They slipped away from the Gryffindors and hurried toward the girls' bathroom. As they rounded a corner, they heard quick footsteps behind them and ducked behind a stone griffin. To their surprise, it was Snape, not Quirrell, headed not toward the dungeons but toward the third floor. "What's he up to?" Harry whispered. "Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers?" "No idea," Ron muttered. They continued toward the bathroom but stopped abruptly when they detected a foul stench, followed by the sight of a 12-foot mountain troll dragging a massive club. Worse, it was entering the very bathroom where Hermione was hiding. They rushed in after it to find Hermione shrinking against the opposite wall, looking ready to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking sinks off the walls as it went. "Confuse it!" Harry yelled desperately to Ron, seizing a tap and throwing it against the wall. What followed was chaotic and terrifying. Ron's levitated club knocked out the troll, but not before Harry had found himself on the troll's shoulders with his wand up its nose, fighting for his life. In the heat of the moment, Harry had nearly lost control of his magical compartmentalization. Shadows had begun gathering at his feet, responding to his fear and anger, but fortunately disappeared when the troll collapsed. When the teachers arrived, McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell, Hermione took the blame, claiming she'd gone looking for the troll herself. It was the beginning of a true friendship between the three of them, solidified by surviving danger together. What Harry noticed, however, was that Snape was limping and Quirrell seemed more afraid of the unconscious troll than made sense for a defense professor. When Quirrell looked directly at Harry, the familiar pain flared in his scar, accompanied by a surge in death energy that nearly made him gasp. Later that night, after everyone else was asleep, Harry slipped out of bed and Shadow traveled to an empty classroom where he could contact Nico securely. Using the black communication stone, he called his mentor's name 3 times while focusing on his death sense. A small, dark portal opened in the air before him, through which he could see Nico's face looking concerned. "What happened?" Nico asked without preamble. "You wouldn't use the stone unless it was serious." Harry quickly explained about the troll, Quirrell's behavior, and Snape's apparent interest in the third-floor corridor. "I nearly lost control," Harry admitted. "The shadows started responding to my emotions during the fight. But no one noticed." "I don't think so. Everyone was focused on the troll." Nico's expression was grave. "This confirms my suspicions about Quirrell. The combination of your scar pain, death energy, and his behavior suggests possession by a powerful spirit, possibly Voldemort himself." Harry's blood ran cold. "Voldemort is possessing my teacher? That's why my scar hurts around him?" "It's the most likely explanation. Your scar connects you to him. Your mother explained that the killing curse created a bond between you. As for Snape heading to the 3rd floor during the chaos, you think he was trying to get past the dog to whatever's being guarded? Possibly. Or checking that no one else was. Keep an eye on both of them, but from a distance. Don't give either one reason to notice you more than necessary." "What about the thing under the trapdoor?" "I've been researching Nicholas Flamel but haven't found anything yet." "Keep looking. The connection to alchemy suggests something powerful, possibly an object that bridges life and death in some way. Those are always dangerous, always coveted." After ending the communication, Harry returned to his bed, his mind spinning with new concerns. If Voldemort was indeed possessing Quirrell, and someone, Snape, Quirrell himself, was after whatever lay beneath the trapdoor, the situation was far more dangerous than he'd initially realized. Quidditch season began in November, and Harry's first match, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, approached rapidly. Despite Wood's intense training sessions, Harry found the sport exhilarating. Flying came naturally to him, and the position of Seeker suited his quick reflexes and keen observational skills, honed through years of necromantic training. The morning of the match, Harry received an unexpected package at breakfast, a brand new Nimbus 2000 broomstick, courtesy of Professor McGonagall. Attached was a note from Nico: "Your father would be proud. He was quite the Quidditch star himself. Stay alert today, sporting events make good distractions for those with ulterior motives." And the warning proved prescient. Halfway through the match, as Harry spotted the golden snitch for the first time, his broom began behaving erratically, trying to buck him off. From over 100 feet in the air, Harry could see Ron and Hermione in the stands with Hagrid, pointing toward the teacher's box where, Harry realized, both Snape and Quirrell were staring unblinkingly at him, muttering continuously. As he clung to the wildly jerking broomstick, Harry faced a dangerous decision. He could feel his control slipping, both of the broom and his carefully compartmentalized magic. Shadows were beginning to gather around him, responding to his fear. If he fell, instinct might take over and he could reveal his necromantic abilities to the entire school by shadow traveling to safety. Fortunately, whatever spell was affecting his broom suddenly broke. Later, he learned that Hermione had set fire to Snape's robes, believing he was the one jinxing the broom. Harry, however, wasn't convinced. His scar had been burning throughout the incident, and his death sense had detected the familiar corrupted energy emanating from Quirrell. The match ended with Harry catching the snitch in a rather unconventional way, nearly swallowing it after a steep dive, securing Gryffindor's victory. But the celebration was tempered by his concerns about what had happened. During tea at Hagrid's afterward, the conversation turned to the three-headed dog and Snape's suspicious behavior. Hagrid accidentally revealed the dog was his and was guarding something belonging to Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Flamel, Harry repeated thoughtfully. I've heard that name before. I shouldn't have said that, Hagrid muttered. Forget I mentioned it. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione had latched onto this clue, spending the following week searching the library for any reference to Nicholas Flamel, though without success. As Christmas approached, bringing snow and a festive atmosphere to the castle, Harry decided to remain at Hogwarts for the holidays. Ron would be staying too, as his parents were visiting his brother Charlie in Romania. Hermione was returning home, promising to search her parents' books for information on Flamel. Nico had offered to bring Harry back to the sanctuary for the break, but Harry saw the holiday as an opportunity to explore the castle more thoroughly with fewer students around. Besides, he admitted to himself, he was curious to experience a proper Hogwarts Christmas. The morning of Christmas Day, Harry woke to find a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed, his first real Christmas presents. Among them was a hand-knitted sweater from Mrs. Weasley, a carved wooden flute from Hagrid, and a small package containing his father's invisibility cloak, sent anonymously but with a note suggesting it had been left in the sender's care. The most unusual gift, however, came from Nico. Inside a black box lined with silver silk lay what appeared to be an ordinary quill made from a raven's feather. The accompanying note explained, "This is a spirit quill, created from a feather freely given by a psychopomp raven from my father's realm. When used with the special ink enclosed, blood mixed with shadow essence, it allows you to write messages directly to spirits without formal summoning. Your parents will be able to respond if they choose. Use it privately, the messages appear and fade on the page rather than remaining permanent. Happy Christmas." And Harry carefully hid the quill and ink in the secret compartment of his trunk, deeply moved by the gift's significance. It would allow him to maintain his connection to his parents even at Hogwarts, without the risk of performing actual summonings. That night, Harry decided to test his father's invisibility cloak by visiting the restricted section of the library to search for information on Flamel. Though he could have used shadow travel, the cloak offered protection against detection by methods that might sense magical transport. The expedition to the library proved unsuccessful when a screaming book alerted Filch to his presence. While fleeing, Harry discovered an unused classroom containing the Mirror of Eriste, which showed him his heart's desire, his family, complete and whole, standing around him with loving smiles. His parents, alive and solid, not the spectral forms he communicated with through necromancy. He returned the following night, drawn by the vision, and was surprised to find Dumbledore waiting for him. "Back again, Harry," the headmaster said quietly from where he sat on one of the desks. Harry felt a rush of fear. Had Dumbledore somehow detected his necromantic abilities? Had he been monitoring Harry's nighttime explorations? I didn't see you, sir." "Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you," said Dumbledore, smiling. "So, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Eriste." Their conversation revealed that the mirror showed the deepest desire of one's heart, for Harry, his family, for Ron, who had accompanied him on his second visit, himself achieving glory beyond his brothers. Dumbledore warned that the mirror provided neither knowledge nor truth and that men had wasted away before it, entranced by what they saw. "The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that." As Harry turned to leave, he hesitated. "Sir, Professor Dumbledore. Can I ask you something?" "Obviously, you've just done so," Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick, woolen socks. One can never have enough socks. Harry knew this couldn't be true, but also recognized the deflection for what it was, a boundary between what the headmaster was willing to share and what remained private. As he walked back to Gryffindor Tower under his cloak, Harry wondered what else Dumbledore might be concealing behind his kindly, eccentric facade. The headmaster had known exactly where to find Harry, suggesting he was monitoring the boy's movements more closely than he let on. How much did he know, or suspect, about Harry's necromantic abilities? The spring term brought renewed focus to their search for Flamel, along with increasingly intense Quidditch practices as Gryffindor pursued the House Cup. During a particularly brutal practice session in the rain, Harry spotted Snape heading into the Forbidden Forest and decided to follow on his broomstick. Hovering above the trees, he witnessed a tense confrontation between Snape and Quirrell. Snape seemed to be threatening the stuttering professor, demanding to know if he'd found a way past that beast of Hagrid's, and warning Quirrell not to make him an enemy. Harry reported this to Ron and Hermione, who interpreted it as confirmation that Snape was trying to steal whatever Fluffy was guarding and forcing Quirrell to help him. Harry, with his additional insights about Quirrell's possible possession, wasn't so sure but kept his reservations to himself. The breakthrough regarding Flamel came from an unexpected source, a chocolate frog card featuring Dumbledore, which mentioned his work with Nicholas Flamel on alchemy. This led Hermione to a massive tome where they discovered that Flamel was the creator of the Philosopher's Stone, which could transform metal into gold and produce the elixir of life, granting immortality. That's what Fluffy's guarding. Hermione exclaimed. The Philosopher's Stone. The pieces fell into place for Harry. The stone's connection to immortality explained the death energy he sensed. It was an object that directly interfered with the natural order of life and death, creating an anomaly his necromantic abilities detected. It also explained why Voldemort might want it. If he existed in a weakened, possibly spectral form possessing Quirrell, the elixir of life could restore him to full power. Their suspicions intensified when they learned that Hagrid had acquired a dragon egg from a stranger in a pub, a stranger who had been particularly interested in Fluffy. Hagrid had revealed that the key to pacifying the three-headed dog was music. Play him a bit music and he'll go straight to sleep. Realizing that this vital information might have been given to the very person seeking the stone, they rushed to inform Dumbledore, only to discover he had been called away to London, suspiciously convenient timing that suggested a deliberate lure. It's tonight, Harry told his friends. Snape, or whoever is after the stone, is going to try and get it tonight. With Dumbledore gone, there's nothing to stop them. Despite Professor McGonagall's dismissal of their concerns, Harry, Ron, and Hermione decided to go after the stone themselves that night. Using the invisibility cloak and a flute Hagrid had given Harry for Christmas, they made their way to the third-floor corridor. Getting past Fluffy proved easier than expected with the music putting him to sleep. They dropped through the trapdoor into a chamber containing Devil's Snare, which Hermione defeated with magical fire. Next came a room of flying keys, where Harry's seeker skills allowed him to capture the correct one, followed by a giant wizard's chessboard where Ron sacrificed himself to secure their victory. Hermione solved Snape's logic puzzle guarding the final chamber, but there was only enough potion for one person to proceed through the magical fire. Harry, determining it must be him, drank the potion and entered the last chamber alone. There, to his shock but not complete surprise, stood Professor Quirrell, not Snape, facing the mirror of Eriste. You! Harry gasped. Quirrell smiled, his face entirely without its usual twitch. Me. I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Potter. But I thought, Snape, Severus. Quirrell laughed coldly. Yes, Severus does seem the type, doesn't he? So useful to have him swooping around like an overgrown bat. Next to him, who would suspect P.P. Poor, St. stuttering P. Professor Quirrell. As they spoke, Harry's scar burned with unprecedented intensity. His death sense was overwhelmed by the corrupted energy emanating from Quirrell, stronger now, more concentrated, as if whatever possessed him was rising closer to the surface. Quirrell revealed that Snape had actually been trying to protect Harry all along, suspecting Quirrell from the start. He then turned to the mirror, frustrated that he could see himself presenting the stone to his master, but couldn't determine how to actually obtain it. "Use the boy," came a high, cold voice that seemed to come from Quirrell himself. Quirrell forced Harry in front of the mirror. Looking into it, Harry saw his reflection reach into its pocket and pull out a blood-red stone. As it did so, he felt the real stone drop into his actual pocket. Somehow, he had acquired it from the mirror. "Well," said Quirrell impatiently. "What do you see?" Harry improvised a lie about winning the house cup, but the high voice spoke again. "He lies. He lies. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough, for this." What happened next would haunt Harry's nightmares for years to come. Quirrell unwrapped his turban to reveal a second face on the back of his head, chalk-white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. "Harry Potter," it whispered. In that moment, Harry's carefully maintained compartmentalization between his wizard and necromantic abilities shattered completely. His death sense overwhelmed him with information. This was a soul fragment, a parasitic spirit that had latched onto Quirrell, corrupting and consuming him from within. Not a possession in the traditional sense, but something even more unnatural. "See what I have become," the face said. "Mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I can share another's body, but there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me, these past weeks, and once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket?" Harry stumbled backward, and Quirrell/Voldemort lunged for him. The moment Quirrell's hands touched Harry's skin, he screamed in agony, his flesh burning and blistering on contact. Harry realized his mother's protection was still active. Quirrell couldn't touch him without suffering terrible pain. In desperation, he grabbed Quirrell's face with his hands, causing the professor to shriek in torment as his skin burned. But Voldemort urged Quirrell to continue the attack, and Harry felt himself weakening. In that critical moment, with consciousness fading, Harry's necromantic abilities activated fully and instinctively. Shadows erupted from every corner of the chamber, flowing toward Harry like living things. They wrapped around him protectively while others lashed out at Quirrell, solidifying into dark tendrils that pierced his corrupted form. Through his death sense, Harry could actually perceive Voldemort's spirit, a twisted, fragmented thing clinging to Quirrell's life force, and instinctively directed the shadows to attack that connection. Quirrell was screaming, Voldemort was howling, and Harry's own voice joined them as he channeled more power than he'd ever attempted before. The shadows responded to his will, trying to tear Voldemort's spirit away from its host. In the chaos, Harry was only dimly aware of a new presence, Dumbledore, rushing into the chamber, his own magic flaring brilliantly against the darkness Harry had summoned. The last thing Harry saw before losing consciousness was the headmaster's shocked face as he witnessed Harry commanding shadows in a display of necromancy that no ordinary wizard should possess. Harry woke in the hospital wing, surrounded by what looked like half a candy shop, gifts from well-wishers. Dumbledore was sitting beside his bed, his expression unreadable. "Good afternoon, Harry," the headmaster said quietly. Harry's mind raced, trying to recall exactly what had happened in those final moments beneath the trapdoor. How much had Dumbledore seen of his necromantic abilities? "Sir, the stone, calm yourself, dear boy, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out. Professor Quirrell did not manage to take it from you. I arrived in time to prevent that, although you were doing very well on your own, I must say. You got there. You saw, I arrived just in time to see the rather extraordinary way you were defending yourself," Dumbledore said, his piercing blue eyes meeting Harry's directly. "Most unusual magic for a first-year student. Most unusual magic for any wizard, in fact." Harry swallowed nervously. "I don't remember exactly what happened. Don't you?" Dumbledore's voice was gentle but penetrating. "The shadows, Harry. They responded to you in a most remarkable way. There was no point denying it. Are you going to expel me? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. For defending yourself against Lord Voldemort? Certainly not. Though I admit I am curious about where you learned such abilities. They are not typically taught at Hogwarts, or indeed, anywhere in the wizarding world these days. The implied question hung in the air between them. Harry considered his options. Outright lies would likely be detected by someone as perceptive as Dumbledore, but the full truth about Nico and years of necromantic training might create more problems than it solved. I discovered I could control shadows when I was very young, Harry said carefully. Living with the Dursleys, it was sometimes the only way I felt safe. This much was true, and Dumbledore's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine regret. I see. And you have been developing this ability on your own? I've practiced, Harry admitted. I found books that helped explain some of it. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. Harry, what you displayed was not simply shadow manipulation, though that itself would be remarkable. You were interacting directly with Voldemort's spirit, perceiving and affecting it in ways that suggest necromantic abilities of considerable power. Harry remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. Necromancy, Dumbledore continued, is considered by many in our world to be among the darkest of arts. Not because it is inherently evil, but because it deals with death, which wizards, as a rule, fear above all else. I don't fear death, Harry said quietly. I understand it better than most people. Yes, Dumbledore said thoughtfully. Perhaps surviving the killing curse created a connection to death magic that manifests in this way. It would explain much. He was offering a plausible explanation that didn't involve Nico or years of deliberate training. Harry seized it gratefully. I think that might be it, sir. I've always been able to sense things related to death. Spirits, shadows. It's gotten stronger as I've gotten older. And you've been controlling it? Developing it intentionally? Harry nodded. I didn't want it controlling me. Dumbledore sighed deeply. A wise approach. Though I must caution you, Harry, such abilities will not be welcomed by most in the wizarding world. Fear often drives people to reject what they don't understand. Are you going to tell anyone, sir? No, Dumbledore said after a moment's consideration. That is your story to tell, when and if you choose to tell it. But I would advise discretion, at least until you are older and better able to weather the inevitable reactions. Relief flooded through Harry. Thank you, sir. However, Dumbledore added, his tone firmer, I would like you to consider allowing me to help guide your development in this area. Necromancy without proper ethical boundaries can lead down dangerous paths. Harry thought of Nico's careful training, the emphasis on respect for natural cycles and the dignity of spirits. I understand the importance of ethics, sir. I would never use these abilities to hurt people or disturb the dead without good reason. Dumbledore nodded, though his eyes remained concerned. We will speak more of this another time, when you are fully recovered. For now, rest assured your secret is safe with me. The conversation then turned to Voldemort, the stone, which Dumbledore revealed would be destroyed, and what had happened to Quirrell. He had not survived the confrontation. Dumbledore explained that Lily's sacrifice had placed a protection in Harry's blood that Voldemort could not touch, and that love was the power the Dark Lord consistently underestimated. After Dumbledore left, Harry reflected on their conversation with mixed feelings. While relieved that his necromantic abilities wouldn't result in expulsion, he was concerned about Dumbledore's interest in guiding his development. The headmaster clearly had his own ideas about how such powers should be used, ideas that might conflict with what Harry had learned from Nico. He would need to be more careful than ever, balancing his training between wizard magic and necromancy while navigating Dumbledore's well-meaning but potentially restrictive oversight. The end-of-year feast brought a final surprise when Dumbledore awarded last-minute points to Gryffindor, 50 each to Ron and Hermione for their roles in protecting the stone, 60 to Harry for pure nerve and outstanding courage, and 10 to Neville for standing up to his friends. These points pushed Gryffindor past Slytherin to win the House Cup, turning the Great Hall's decorations from green and silver to red and gold amid thunderous applause. As Harry packed his trunk for the journey home, he reflected on his first year at Hogwarts. He had successfully integrated into the wizarding world, made true friends, discovered his talent for Quidditch, and directly confronted Voldemort, all while maintaining his necromantic training in secret. Until the final confrontation, at least. Dumbledore's discovery of his abilities complicated matters, but also provided a plausible cover story, that his necromancy was a side effect of surviving the killing curse rather than the result of years of training with a son of Hades. On the Hogwarts Express heading back to London, Harry, Ron, and Hermione shared a compartment, discussing their plans for the summer. Ron invited Harry to visit the Burrow, and Hermione promised to write regularly. "You must come and stay this summer," said Ron. "Both of you, I'll send an owl." "Thanks," said Harry. "I'll need something to look forward to." He didn't tell them he had no intention of staying with the Dursleys. Nico would be waiting to shadow travel him directly to their sanctuary from a secluded spot near King's Cross. There, they would discuss everything that had happened and plan for the year ahead. As the train pulled into platform 9 3/4, Harry felt a curious mixture of sadness at leaving Hogwarts and excitement about returning to Nico's training. His first year had proven that he could balance both sides of his magical heritage, wizard and necromancer. But it had also confirmed his parents' warning about Voldemort. The Dark Wizard was still out there, weakened but determined to return. And somehow, Harry knew their paths would cross again. When that happened, he would need every skill at his disposal, both the wizard magic taught at Hogwarts and the necromantic abilities he practiced in shadow. The boy who lived and the son of Hades' apprentice were one and the same, and that unique combination might be the key to facing whatever darkness lay ahead. Chapter 3, The Chamber of Secrets and Spirits. The summer at Nico's underground sanctuary flew by in a blur of intensive training. Harry had returned from Hogwarts with a renewed sense of purpose and a list of questions longer than a giant's arm. Each morning began with physical conditioning, running through shadow-constructed obstacle courses, practicing combat roles, and honing his reflexes. Afternoons were dedicated to more advanced necromancy than he'd dared attempt at school. Again, Nico ordered, watching as Harry tried to maintain control of 3 skeleton warriors simultaneously. "Your concentration is slipping on the third one." Sweat beaded on Harry's forehead as he channeled death energy through his outstretched hands. 2 of the skeletons moved with fluid precision, executing the combat maneuvers Nico had taught them. The third wobbled unsteadily, its skull tilting at an awkward angle. "I almost had it," Harry muttered as the third skeleton collapsed into a pile of bones. "Almost isn't good enough when you're facing something like Voldemort," Nico replied, though his tone was more concerned than harsh. "What we saw beneath Hogwarts confirms he's found ways to anchor his spirit to the mortal world. That makes him more dangerous than an ordinary wizard." Harry nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "He felt wrong when I sensed him through Quirrell. Fractured somehow. Not like a normal spirit at all." Nico's expression darkened. "That matches what your mother suggested. Some kind of soul magic, splitting himself to achieve a form of immortality. Can that even be done?" "It shouldn't be," Nico said grimly. "It violates every natural law of life and death. But dark magic often finds ways around such laws, usually at terrible cost." Their conversation was interrupted by Hedwig's arrival, swooping into the training room with a letter clutched in her talons. Harry recognized Ron's messy handwriting immediately. "Third letter this week," he said, taking the envelope. "He's really pushing for me to visit the Burrow." Nico studied him thoughtfully. "You should go." "Really?" Harry looked up in surprise. "I thought we'd be training right until school starts." "You've made good progress. Besides, building alliances in the wizarding world is just as important as strengthening your abilities." Nico's mouth quirked into a rare half-smile. "Even my father acknowledges the value of political connections." Harry grinned. "I doubt Ron's thinking about political connections when he invites me over." Maybe not consciously. But the Weasleys are a well-connected magical family, even if they're not wealthy or politically powerful themselves. Their loyalty is worth cultivating. That sounds manipulative when you put it that way, Harry frowned. Nico shrugged. It's just reality. Think of it as building genuine friendships that also happen to be strategically valuable. Harry considered this as he read Ron's latest invitation. The Weasleys were planning to pick him up from the Dursleys' house the following weekend, which posed an obvious problem since Harry hadn't set foot in Privet Drive since Nico rescued him 7 years ago. We'll need to create a cover story, he said, looking up from the letter. Ron thinks I've been at the Dursleys all summer. We can work with that. Nico took a seat on a nearby bench, his expression turning serious. Before you go, though, we need to discuss what happened with Dumbledore. Harry had written to Nico immediately after his hospital wing conversation with the headmaster, explaining how Dumbledore had witnessed his necromantic abilities during the confrontation with Quirrell. He bought the explanation that my powers came from surviving the killing curse, Harry said. But he's going to be watching me more closely now. He even offered to guide my development. Classic Dumbledore, Nico muttered. Always collecting powerful pieces for his chessboard. You don't trust him? I think his intentions are generally good, Nico said carefully. But he operates on a scale where individual well-being sometimes gets sacrificed for the greater good. Your parents felt the same way. Harry nodded, remembering his parents' warnings about the headmaster. So what do I do? Allow him to think he's guiding you, but maintain your independence. Learn everything his people can teach you about wizard magic, it's valuable knowledge. Just don't let him dictate how you develop your necromancy. Nico hesitated. And be prepared for others to discover your abilities. Secrets rarely stay secret at Hogwarts. That was Harry's concern too. He'd managed to keep his powers hidden for most of his first year, but the confrontation with Quirrell had exposed his abilities to Dumbledore. Who might notice next? And how would they react to the boy who lived practicing what most wizards considered the darkest of arts? A few days later, Harry found himself standing on the curb of Privet Drive, a trunk full of wizard supplies and necromantic tools at his feet. Nico had shadow-traveled him to a secluded spot a few streets away, and they'd walked the remaining distance together. Are you sure I can't just blow it up? Nico muttered, glaring at number 4. Pretty sure that would cause more problems than it would solve, Harry replied, though the thought was admittedly tempting. They'd chosen a time when the Dursleys were known to be away, Vernon at work, Petunia at her garden club, and Dudley terrorizing the neighborhood with his friends. The plan was simple. Nico would cast a minor illusion to make it appear that Harry had been staying in his old room, while Harry waited outside for the Weasleys to arrive. I still can't believe they never noticed you were gone, Nico said as he examined the house. 7 years and not a single checkup from the wizard authorities. Dumbledore mentioned blood warts tied to my aunt, Harry recalled. Maybe they just monitored those and assumed I was inside. Nico's expression darkened. That's negligent even by divine standards, and my father is hardly parent of the year. Before Harry could respond, a battered blue Ford Anglia came rumbling down the street, stopping with a slight sputter in front of the house. The doors opened to reveal Ron and twins Fred and George, all with identical flaming red hair and freckles. Harry! Ron called, jumping out of the car. Ready to escape the Muggle prison? Harry grinned, dragging his trunk toward the car. You have no idea. The twins hopped out to help with the luggage while Ron pumped Harry's hand enthusiastically. Brilliant summer so far, mate. Ours has been mad. Dad's been working overtime at the ministry, and Percy's locked himself in his room studying. You'd think being made prefect last year would be enough, but no. Ron's chatter cut off abruptly when he noticed Nico standing a few feet away, arms crossed and expression impassive. Who's that? He whispered to Harry. My guardian, Harry replied. The one I told you about last year. Ron's eyes widened. The Muggle who takes care of you when you're not at the Dursleys. Harry had simplified his living situation considerably when explaining it to his friends. As far as they knew, he split his time between his awful relatives and a guardian who had some connection to his parents. "Mr. Di Angelo," Harry called, "these are my friends from school." Nico approached with the fluid grace that always reminded Harry of a predator. At 23, he cut an intimidating figure in his black clothing and silver skull rings. "Ronald Weasley," Nico nodded. "And the famous Weasley twins. Harry's told me about all of you." Fred and George exchanged curious glances before stepping forward with identical grins. "He looks more wizard than muggle, doesn't he, George?" Fred stage whispered. "Definitely has that dark and mysterious vibe, Fred," George agreed. "Bit like Professor Snape but with better hair." Nico's mouth twitched. "I'll take that as a compliment, I think. Mr. Di Angelo is entrusting Harry to your family's care," he continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I expect he'll be returned in the same condition you found him." The twins straightened slightly under his gaze. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Our mother would skin us alive if anything happened to Harry anyway," Ron added. Nico turned to Harry. "Remember what we discussed. And use the communication method if anything unusual occurs." Harry nodded, understanding the reference to the black stone he carried in his pocket. "I will." After a quick, slightly awkward goodbye, Harry climbed into the Ford Anglia with his friends. As they drove away, he glanced back to see Nico still standing on the curb, a solitary figure in black who would vanish into the shadows the moment the car was out of sight. "Blimey, Harry," Ron said once they were on their way. "Your guardian's a bit intense, isn't he?" "He's not so bad once you get to know him," Harry replied. "Just protective." "Is he really a muggle?" Fred asked from the front seat. "He seems to know about the wizarding world." Harry had prepared for this question. "He's what Nico calls muggle-adjacent, not magical himself but aware of magic through family connections." This satisfied the Weasleys, and conversation quickly turned to more exciting topics like Quidditch, the upcoming school year, and the Burrow, which Harry would be seeing for the first time. "It's not much," Ron said as they flew the car, which apparently had that capability, over patchwork countryside fields. "Nothing like Hogwarts or anything." "It sounds brilliant," Harry assured him, genuinely excited to experience a proper wizarding home. The Burrow was everything Harry had hoped for and more, a ramshackle structure that looked like it was held together by magic, which, as it turned out, it largely was. Multiple stories had been added haphazardly, creating a towering, crooked silhouette against the sky. Inside was even better, a kitchen where dishes washed themselves, a clock that showed the whereabouts of family members instead of the time, and an atmosphere of warmth that permeated every corner. Mrs. Weasley, a plump woman with the same flaming red hair as her children, welcomed Harry with a bone-crushing hug and immediate offers of food. "You're much too thin, dear," she fussed, piling sausages onto his plate. "Don't those muggles feed you properly?" Harry exchanged a quick glance with Ron. They're not big on second helpings." This was apparently the wrong thing to say, as it prompted Mrs. Weasley to add 3 more sausages and a large scoop of mashed potatoes to his already overflowing plate. The days at the Burrow passed in a blur of Quidditch in the paddock behind the house, degenoming the garden, which involved swinging the potato-headed creatures in circles before flinging them over the fence, and learning about wizard family life. Harry found himself welcomed as an honorary Weasley, included in everything from mealtimes to Percy's prefect lectures, which everyone else tuned out. The only difficult moment came when Mr. Weasley, who worked in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office at the Ministry of Magic, began questioning Harry about Muggle devices like telephones and plugs. Harry realized his knowledge was limited by years of living in Nico's magical sanctuary rather than the Muggle world. "Dad's obsessed with Muggle stuff," Ron explained later as they prepared for bed in his violently orange room, decorated with posters of the Chudley Cannons Quidditch team. "Collects plugs and batteries. Drives Mum mad. I just don't want him to realize I haven't actually lived with Muggles much," Harry admitted. It's complicated. Ron shrugged. Your guardian sounds decent enough, even if he is a bit scary. Don't blame you for spending time with him instead of those awful relatives. Harry smiled gratefully. Ron might not understand the full truth, but his simple acceptance was exactly what Harry needed. The trip to Diagon Alley to purchase school supplies brought a new set of challenges. The Weasleys traveled by Floo powder, a magical substance thrown into a fireplace that transported the traveler to their destination through the Floo network. Harry, who had never used this method before, ended up in Nocturne Alley, a shadier district catering to the dark arts. Under different circumstances, Harry might have found the shops fascinating. They reminded him of certain sections of the underworld markets Nico had shown him. But being recognized as Harry Potter in such a location could create unwanted complications. He was relieved when Hagrid found him and escorted him back to Diagon Alley proper. The real excitement, however, came at Flourish and Blot's bookshop, where Gilderoy Lockhart, a flamboyantly dressed wizard with wavy blonde hair and a dazzling smile, was signing copies of his autobiography. When Lockhart spotted Harry, he dragged him into a photo opportunity, announcing that he would be the new defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts. As Harry tried to escape the limelight, he collided with a young girl who turned out to be Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister who would be starting Hogwarts that year. Before he could properly introduce himself, Draco Malfoy appeared, sneering. Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter? Famous Harry Potter can't even go into a bookshop without making the front page. Leave him alone, Ginny said, glaring at Malfoy. Look, Potter, you've got yourself a girlfriend, Malfoy drawled. Ron and Hermione, who had joined them in the bookshop, moved to Harry's side, forming a united front against Malfoy. The confrontation escalated when Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, joined the scene, exchanging barbed words with Arthur Weasley. What caught Harry's attention, however, wasn't the verbal sparring. It was the strange death energy he detected emanating from Lucius Malfoy's person, specifically, from an old book he was handling. As the elder Malfoy placed the book back in Ginny Weasley's cauldron after examining her second-hand textbook, Harry's necromantic senses flared. There was something deeply wrong about that book, something that felt disturbingly similar to the corrupted energy he'd sensed from Quirrell when possessed by Voldemort. Before he could investigate further, the confrontation between the adults erupted into a physical altercation, with Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy exchanging blows until Hagrid pulled them apart. In the chaos, Harry lost track of the book and the strange energy signature. That night at the Burrow, while everyone else slept, Harry used the spirit quill to write to his parents, describing what he'd sensed. There was something wrong about the book Mr. Malfoy put in Ginny's cauldron, he wrote, the words appearing in shimmering black ink before slowly fading. It felt alive somehow, but twisted. Almost like what I sensed from Quirrell last year. His mother's response formed on the page moments later, her handwriting elegant and flowing. Trust your instincts, Harry. Necromancers can sense magical corruption that others miss. If you detected something similar to Voldemort's energy, it could be dangerous. Should I tell someone? Harry wrote. Dumbledore maybe. This time his father responded, his script more angular than Lily's. Without proof, it would be difficult. The Malfoys have significant political influence. But keep an eye on the youngest Weasley. If the book is affecting her, you might notice signs, exhaustion, personality changes, gaps in memory. I will, Harry promised. I'm worried about going back to Hogwarts after what happened with Quirrell. Dumbledore knows about my abilities now, and what if others find out? Dumbledore will keep your secret, Lily wrote. Not out of kindness, but because you're valuable to him. As for others, some may fear what they don't understand, but true friends will stand by you. Your father and I had friends who accepted us completely, Remus despite his lycanthropy, Sirius despite his family's dark reputation. Harry paused, quill hovering over the page. You've mentioned Sirius Black before. He was your best friend, right, Dad? There was a longer pause before new words formed. Yes. My brother in all but blood. He's in Azkaban now, Harry. Convicted of betraying us to Voldemort and killing Peter Pettigrew, another of our friends. This was news to Harry. Did he really do it? Another pause. We don't know. Death gives perspective, but not omniscience. What we do know is that Sirius was fiercely loyal. It's hard to believe he would betray us. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Could I talk to him somehow? With my abilities? No, both parents wrote simultaneously, the words darker and more forceful than before. Azkaban is guarded by Dementors, creatures that feed on positive emotions and memories. They're anathema to necromancers. Approaching them with your death sense fully open would be excruciating, possibly fatal. Stay far away from them, Harry. Harry reluctantly agreed, and their conversation shifted to lighter topics, his time at the Burrow, Quidditch with the Weasleys, and his upcoming second year. By the time he put the quill away, he felt both comforted by his parents' guidance and unsettled by the warnings about the mysterious book and Azkaban's Dementors. The journey to Hogwarts nearly ended before it began when Harry and Ron found themselves unable to pass through the barrier to platform 9 3/4. In a moment of questionable judgment, they decided to fly Mr. Weasley's enchanted car to Hogwarts instead. The trip ended disastrously with them crashing into the Whomping Willow, a violent tree on the school grounds, and nearly being expelled before the term officially started. Of all the irresponsible, foolhardy decisions, Professor McGonagall fumed as she escorted them to her office. You could have been seen by Muggles. You could have died. The lecture continued in her office, with Snape watching from the doorway like a circling vulture, clearly hoping for their expulsion. When Dumbledore arrived, his quiet disappointment hit harder than McGonagall's outrage. I'll be writing to your families tonight, McGonagall concluded after assigning detentions. Now get up to the feast. You've missed the sorting but not the meal. As they left her office, Harry felt a prickle of anxiety. Letters to families meant one to the Dursleys, who wouldn't care, and possibly one to Nico, who definitely would. He'd have to use the Spirit Quill tonight to explain before Nico received McGonagall's official version of events. The Great Hall was buzzing with excited chatter when they entered. Harry spotted Ginny at the Gryffindor table, now wearing new robes and a Gryffindor tie. She'd been sorted into their house. Hermione made room for them, her expression oscillating between relief that they were safe and disapproval of their method of arrival. Everyone's talking about how you flew a car to Hogwarts, she whispered. It's all over the school. We didn't do it for attention, Ron muttered, piling his plate with food. Harry was about to respond when he felt it again, that strange, corrupted energy he'd sensed in Diagon Alley. It was coming from Ginny's direction, specifically from her bag where a small black book was partially visible. His death sense flared in recognition. Whatever that book was, it contained the same twisted life force he'd detected from Quirrell when possessed. Reaching out carefully with his necromantic senses, Harry tried to get a better reading without being obvious. The book had a pulse, not physical, but spiritual. A heartbeat of dark energy that felt fractured, incomplete, yet somehow alive. Harry? You all right, mate? Ron asked, noticing his distraction. Fine, Harry said quickly, pulling his awareness back. Just tired from, nearly being killed by a tree. Ron snorted with laughter, and the moment passed. But Harry made a mental note to keep a close eye on both the book and Ginny. If his suspicions were correct, that innocent-looking diary could be exceedingly dangerous. The next day brought a howler for Ron from Mrs. Weasley, whose magically amplified voice filled the great hall with a blistering tirade about stealing the car. Classes began in earnest, with herbology featuring repotting mandrakes, whose cries could kill if heard without protection, and transfiguration challenging them to turn beetles into buttons. Defense against the dark arts, now taught by Gilderoy Lockhart, proved to be a farce. The classroom walls were covered with portraits of Lockhart himself, all smiling and winking. His first lesson involved releasing Cornish pixies into the room and then fleeing when he couldn't control them, leaving Harry, Ron, and Hermione to clean up the chaos. Can you believe him? Hermione said as they walked to dinner. All those books he's written, all those amazing things he's done, says he's done, Ron corrected. I'm starting to think he's a complete fraud. Harry, who had been monitoring Ginny whenever possible, noticed she seemed paler than usual, picking at her food during meals. Several times he'd caught her writing intently in the black diary, and each time his death sense had detected that unsettling energy pulsing more strongly. He wrote to Nico using their coded system, explaining his concerns about the diary and asking for advice. Nico's response was cautious but alarming. If it contains a similar energy signature to what you sensed from Quirrell, treat it as extremely dangerous. Objects that contain spirits or soul fragments are among the most insidious magical artifacts. They can influence or possess the unsuspecting. Keep monitoring but do not touch it yourself. Your necromantic sensitivity might make you more vulnerable to its influence, not less. September faded into October, bringing misty mornings and a chill to the castle corridors. Harry's Quidditch training intensified under Oliver Wood's fanatical captaincy, often scheduling practices at dawn or in pouring rain. During one such early morning session, they encountered the Slytherin team on the pitch, leading to a confrontation where Draco Malfoy was revealed as their new seeker, a position his father had purchased for him by donating 7 top-of-the-line Nimbus 2001 broomsticks to the team. When Hermione pointed out that no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, Malfoy called her a filthy little mudblood, causing an uproar. Ron's attempt to hex Malfoy backfired due to his broken wand, leaving him belching slugs for hours afterward. I don't understand why everyone reacted so strongly, Harry said later as they sat in Hagrid's hut, watching Ron vomit slugs into a basin. What exactly does mudblood mean? It's about the most insulting thing he could think of, Ron gasped between slug attacks. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who's muggle-born. It means dirty blood. Hagrid nodded grimly. There are some wizards, like the Malfoys, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood. That's ridiculous, Harry frowned. Some of the most talented students in our year are muggle-born. Hermione's the best in the class. Exactly, Hermione said, though she looked touched by Harry's defense. It's just prejudice. It doesn't make any logical sense. As they walked back to the castle, Harry reflected on the wizarding world's many biases. Blood status was just one form of prejudice, attitudes toward different types of magic were another. How would his classmates react if they knew he was a necromancer? Would they call him dark and dangerous, with the same contempt Malfoy had used when saying mudblood? The first hints that something was very wrong at Hogwarts came on Halloween night. Harry was attending nearly headless Nick's Death Day party in the dungeons, a grim celebration featuring rotten food, for ghosts to almost taste by floating through it, spectral musicians playing saws, and hundreds of pearly white transparent guests. While Ron and Hermione seemed uncomfortable with the macabre atmosphere, Harry found himself fascinated. His necromantic senses were in their element here, surrounded by spiritual energy. He could perceive the complex tethers binding each ghost to the mortal realm, the variations in their spiritual composition, even the subtle differences in how they manifested. Mr. Potter, nearly headless Nick floated over, his head wobbling precariously on his partially severed neck. I'm so pleased you could attend. Most living beings find our celebrations rather dreary. It's fascinating, Harry said honestly. I've never seen so many different types of spirits in one place before. Nick gave him a curious look. Types? Yes, I suppose we do very considerably. You have a rather unusual perception for one so young. Before Harry could respond, another ghost drifted toward them, a gaunt, hollow-eyed spectre with silver bloodstains down his robes. Nicholas, the Bloody Baron nodded stiffly. And young Potter. How interesting to find you here. Harry had encountered the Slytherin ghost several times during his first year, always feeling the Baron's suspicious gaze following him. Now, face to face, he could sense the Baron's spiritual energy more clearly, ancient, bound by guilt and what felt like centuries-old remorse. Baron, Harry acknowledged politely. It's an honor to meet you properly. Is it? The Baron's voice was a rasping whisper. Most students flee at the sight of me. Yet you show no fear. One might wonder why. Harry is a most unusual student, Nick interjected. He seems quite comfortable among the dead. The Baron's translucent eyes narrowed. Yes. I've noticed that. Almost as if he can see more than others. Harry maintained a neutral expression, though internally he was concerned by the ghost's perceptiveness. I've always been fascinated by history. You and the other house ghosts have witnessed centuries of Hogwarts past. Indeed, the Baron replied, clearly unconvinced by this explanation. History. That must be it. He drifted away, but not before giving Harry one last penetrating look that suggested their conversation wasn't over. I'd be careful around him, Nick warned once the Baron was out of earshot. He's unusually perceptive, even for a ghost. And he's been interested in you since your arrival last year. Harry nodded, making a mental note to be more guarded with his abilities around the castle ghosts. They could be valuable allies or dangerous liabilities if they realized the full extent of his necromantic powers. As the party continued, Harry began to hear something that neither Ron nor Hermione seemed to notice, a voice, cold and murderous, speaking from within the walls themselves, rip, tear, kill. He followed the voice upward from the dungeons, Ron and Hermione hurrying behind him in confusion. The voice grew louder, more excited, so hungry, for so long, kill, time to kill. It led them to the second floor, where they found a shocking scene, Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, hanging stiff as a board from a torch bracket, and on the wall behind her, foot-high words gleamed in the torchlight, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Within moments, the corridor filled with students coming from the Halloween feast. Silence fell as they spotted the immobile cat and the threatening message. Then Draco Malfoy pushed to the front, his cold voice cutting through the quiet, enemies of the air, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods. Filch arrived and immediately accused Harry of killing his cat. Dumbledore's intervention saved him from the caretaker's wrath, as the headmaster explained that Mrs. Norris wasn't dead but petrified, frozen in a state between life and death that would require a restorative potion to reverse. As the crowd dispersed, Harry extended his necromantic senses toward the cat. What he detected confirmed Dumbledore's assessment. Mrs. Norris's life force was suspended, neither flowing nor extinguished, as if time itself had stopped for her. More concerning was the residual death energy clinging to the wall and the water on the floor, a signature unlike anything he'd encountered before. Not human, not ghost, but something ancient and reptilian. The next day, theories about the Chamber of Secrets spread through the school like wildfire. Professor Binns reluctantly explained the legend during History of Magic. Salazar Slytherin had supposedly built a hidden chamber within Hogwarts before leaving the school, containing a monster that only his true heir could control, a monster meant to purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy to study magic. But the school has been searched hundreds of times, Binns concluded. No such chamber has been found. Professor, Hermione asked, what exactly did the legend say was in the chamber? The chamber is said to be home to something that only the heir of Slytherin can control, some sort of monster. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. A monster only the heir could control would explain the voice Harry heard that others couldn't. But what kind of creature could petrify its victims? And why could Harry hear it when no one else could? That night, he used the spirit quill to consult his parents again. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, he wrote. A cat was petrified, and I could hear a voice in the walls that no one else noticed. It was talking about killing. His father's response came quickly, the chamber is real, then. There were rumors during our time at Hogwarts, whispers that it had been opened once before, decades earlier, but nothing confirmed. What kind of monster petrifies its victims? Harry asked. Many possibilities, Lily wrote. A basilisk can kill with its gaze, but looking indirectly, through a reflection or camera lens, might result in petrification instead of death. A basilisk? Harry remembered reading about them in one of Nico's monster identification books. A giant serpent that can kill with a look. Yes, his mother confirmed. They live for centuries and obey parselmouths, wizards who can speak to snakes. Salazar Slytherin was famous for this ability. That explains why I could hear it when others couldn't, Harry realized. I must be hearing Parseltongue. There was a pause before his father's handwriting appeared. Harry, Parseltongue is extremely rare and considered a dark ability in the wizarding world. If you can understand snake language, you should be very careful who knows about it. But I'm not a parselmouth, Harry protested. I've never talked to snakes. There may be a connection to your necromantic abilities, Lily suggested. Serpents have ancient associations with death and the underworld across many cultures. Your death sense might be translating the basilisk speech for you, rather than true Parseltongue. This made sense to Harry. His necromantic training had enhanced his perception of all things connected to death, and a basilisk, with its lethal gaze, would certainly qualify. Be very careful, Harry, his mother wrote. A basilisk is incredibly dangerous, even for a trained wizard. If that's what's in the chamber, don't try to confront it alone. The situation escalated a week later when a first-year Gryffindor named Colin Creevey was found petrified, his camera raised to his eye as if he tried to photograph his attacker. Harry had noticed the small, mousy-haired boy following him around with his camera, snapping pictures and asking for autographs, behavior Harry found uncomfortable but harmless. Now Colin lay in the hospital wing, as stiff and unmoving as Mrs. Norris. He must have seen the monster through his camera, Hermione theorized in a whispered conversation in the library. That's why he was petrified instead of killed. But what was Colin doing wandering around at night in the first place? Ron wondered. Harry had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what, or who, Colin had been trying to photograph. The young boy's fascination with the boy who lived had been obvious. Meanwhile, Harry noticed Ginny Weasley growing increasingly pale and withdrawn. She appeared exhausted at mealtimes, dark circles forming under her eyes. Most concerning, his death sense detected the diary's corrupt energy growing stronger around her, pulsing with what almost felt like satisfaction after each attack. When Professor Lockhart started a dueling club to teach students to defend themselves, Harry, Ron, and Hermione attended, hoping for useful skills despite their low opinion of Lockhart's teaching abilities. The club turned disastrous when Snape paired Harry with Malfoy for a demonstration, and Malfoy conjured a large black snake that slithered aggressively toward Justin Finch-Fletchley, a Hufflepuff student. Without thinking, Harry opened his death sense toward the serpent, perceiving its predatory nature and instinctively projecting calming energy toward it, a technique Nico had taught him for dealing with underworld creatures. To his shock, what emerged from his mouth wasn't English but a series of hissing sounds. Leave him alone. The snake slumped to the floor, docile. But when Harry looked up, he found the entire hall staring at him in horror. What are you playing at? Justin demanded before fleeing the hall. Ron and Hermione dragged Harry from the room as whispers erupted around them. You're a parselmouth. Ron said once they were alone in the Gryffindor common room. Why didn't you tell us? I'm a what? A parselmouth, you can talk to snakes. I know, Harry said, confused by their reactions. I mean, I just realized I could do it, but what's the big deal? It's a big deal, Hermione explained, because Salazar Slytherin was famous for being able to talk to snakes. That's why the symbol of Slytherin House is a serpent. Harry's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. People will think I'm his descendant. Exactly, Ron nodded grimly. And now everyone's going to think you're the one attacking Muggleborns. Harry tried to explain that he'd never spoken to a snake before, that he'd just been trying to calm it, not encourage it to attack. But he could see the doubt lingering in his friend's eyes. Even they weren't entirely convinced. The school's reaction was swift and severe. Students who had previously greeted Harry in the corridors now hurried past with averted eyes. Some even took long detours to avoid crossing his path. Fred and George tried to lighten the mood by marching ahead of Harry in the corridors, shouting, make way for the heir of Slytherin, seriously evil wizard coming through. But their jokes only highlighted how seriously most of the school took the rumors. Harry decided to visit Justin in Hufflepuff to explain that he'd been trying to stop the snake, not set it on him. But when he reached the Hufflepuff common room area, he overheard a group of Hufflepuffs discussing him. So anyway, I told Justin to hide in our dormitory. I mean to say, if Potter's marked him down as his next victim, it's best he keeps a low profile for a while. But why would he want to attack Justin? Asked a girl with blonde pigtails. Justin let slip to Potter that he was Muggle-born. And you know Potter's the heir of Slytherin, so. Do we really think it's Potter, though? Said another boy. He's always seemed nice. And, well, he's the one who made you-know-who disappear. That doesn't sound like a dark wizard to me. That's probably why you-know-who wanted to kill him in the first place. Didn't want another Dark Lord competing with him. Harry backed away, sickened by what he'd heard. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was being accused of attacking Muggle-borns when his own mother had been Muggle-born and his best friend was Hermione. As he turned to leave, he collided with the Gryffindor ghost, nearly headless Nick, who was floating nearby looking troubled. "Hello, Harry," Nick said quietly. "Difficult times, these. You heard? Hard not to. Ghosts are excellent eavesdroppers by nature." Nick hesitated. "I don't believe the rumors, for what it's worth. I've observed you closely this past year, and you don't strike me as someone who would attack innocent students." "Thanks, Nick," Harry said, genuinely touched by the ghost's support. "There's something else," Nick continued, lowering his voice. "The other ghosts have noticed your unusual awareness. The Baron in particular has been asking questions. I've deflected as best I can, but you should know that your sensitivity to our kind hasn't gone unobserved." Harry's stomach sank further. Just what he needed, more rumors about his unusual abilities. "I appreciate the warning," he said. "I'm not trying to hide anything, it's just complicated." Nick supplied with a ghostly smile. "Most things worth knowing are. Don't worry, Mr. Potter. The dead can be more discreet than the living when needed." Before Harry could respond, he heard a strange gurgling, moaning sound from the next corridor. He and Nick rounded the corner to find Justin Finch-Fletchley lying on the floor, rigid and cold, with a look of shock frozen on his face. And beside him, floating horizontally about 6 feet above the ground, was nearly headless Nick, no longer pearly white and transparent, but black and smoky, like a negative image of his usual self. "Oh no," Harry whispered, as the Nick beside him faded slightly in distress. "That's me," the ghost exclaimed. "But how?" Students began to pour into the corridor, drawn by the commotion. As they spotted Harry standing over the petrified victims, gasps and screams erupted. Peeves the poltergeist appeared, cackling with glee as he shouted, "Attack! Attack! Another attack! No mortal or ghost is safe. Run for your lives! Attack!" Doors banged open along the corridor as students rushed out of classrooms. In the confusion, Harry found himself cornered by Ernie Macmillan, the Hufflepuff who had been telling his housemates that Harry was the heir of Slytherin. Caught in the act. Ernie yelled, his face white, pointing dramatically at Harry. "That will do, Macmillan," said Professor McGonagall, who had arrived on the scene. As Hagrid carried Justin to the hospital wing, Professor Flitwick and Professor Sinistra carried Nick's petrified form in a large black anemone net. McGonagall led Harry directly to Dumbledore's office. Left alone briefly in the circular room filled with delicate silver instruments and portraits of previous headmasters, Harry encountered the sorting hat again and impulsively placed it on his head, asking whether it had been right to put him in Gryffindor given everyone's suspicions. Said the small voice in his ear. "Difficult, just as it was the first time. You have many qualities that would serve you well in Slytherin: ambition, resourcefulness, a certain disregard for rules when they conflict with your goals. And your particular talents might be better understood there." Harry tensed, knowing the hat was referring to his necromancy. "But I stand by what I said before, Gryffindor suits the whole of you, not just parts. Your courage in facing your dual nature, your loyalty to friends, your willingness to sacrifice for others, these are Gryffindor traits through and through." Before Harry could respond, a strange, gagging noise drew his attention to a decrepit-looking bird on a golden perch nearby. As Harry watched, the bird burst into flames, collapsing into a pile of ashes just as Dumbledore entered the office. "You're Phoenix," Harry gasped, horrified. "I couldn't do anything, about time too," Dumbledore said, smiling at Harry's confusion. "Fawkes has been looking dreadful for days. Phoenixes burst into flame when it's time for them to die and are reborn from the ashes." Sure enough, a tiny, wrinkled newborn bird poked its head out of the ashes. As Harry watched the miraculous rebirth, his necromantic senses detected something extraordinary, the complete cycle of death and rebirth contained within one being, a perfect natural balance that felt deeply right to his death sense. "Fascinating creatures, Phoenixes," Dumbledore observed, watching Harry's rapt expression. "They can carry immensely heavy loads, their tears have healing powers, and they make highly faithful pets." Harry nodded, still entranced by the perfect life-death cycle he was perceiving. "I believe you know why you're here, Harry," Dumbledore said, his tone growing more serious. "I didn't attack Justin or Nick, Professor." "I don't believe you did," Dumbledore assured him. "But I must ask if there's anything you'd like to tell me." "Anything at all." Harry hesitated, considering whether to mention the voice he'd heard, the diary he'd been monitoring, his suspicions about a basilisk. But without solid proof, would Dumbledore believe him? Or would it just seem like an attempt to deflect suspicion? "No, sir," he said finally. "There's nothing." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, his blue eyes seeming to look straight through Harry. "Very well. You may go." As Harry left the office, he couldn't shake the feeling that Dumbledore knew he was holding something back, and was disappointed by his lack of trust. The double attack on Justin and nearly headless Nick turned the tide of suspicion against Harry into a flood. Most students were now convinced he was the heir of Slytherin, and even the Weasley twins' jokes couldn't lighten the atmosphere. Only Ron, Hermione, and surprisingly, Ginny Weasley, when she wasn't lost in the diary, seemed to fully believe in his innocence. The most dramatic reaction came from Lockhart, who decided to boost morale by decorating the Great Hall for Valentine's Day with large, lurid pink flowers and heart-shaped confetti falling from the ceiling. Worse, he employed a dozen surly-looking dwarfs wearing golden wings and carrying harps to deliver valentines throughout the school. One such dwarf cornered Harry in a crowded corridor, wrestling him to the ground to deliver a singing valentine that Harry suspected came from Ginny. "His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad, his hair is as dark as a blackboard. I wish he was mine, he's really divine, the hero who conquered the Dark Lord." Harry's humiliation was complete when his bag split open during the struggle, spilling his books, parchment, and quill across the floor, nearly exposing his spirit quill before he hastily stuffed it back into his bag. Malfoy seized the opportunity to taunt him, only to be confronted by a furious Ginny Weasley who defended Harry with unexpected vehemence. The encounter left Harry worried about Ginny's growing attachment to him, especially given her connection to the diary. He needed to find a way to separate her from the book before whatever malevolent force it contained completely overwhelmed her. An opportunity arose unexpectedly when Harry discovered his dormitory ransacked, his possessions strewn across the floor. Only one item appeared to be missing, Riddle's diary, which Ginny must have taken back in a panic after seeing Harry with it. "She must be the one who ransacked your dormitory," Hermione whispered as they discussed the situation in the library. "But why would the heir of Slytherin want to steal a blank diary?" "It's not just a diary," Harry said, finally deciding to share his suspicions. "I think it's possessing Ginny somehow. Every time she uses it, I've noticed she looks worse, paler, more tired. And there's something wrong about it, something dark." "How can you tell?" Ron asked, looking alarmed at the suggestion his sister was being possessed. "I just notice things sometimes," Harry said evasively. Magical signatures. Ron seemed ready to press for more details, but Hermione cut in, "We need to find out more about this diary. Who this TM Riddle was, when he was at Hogwarts, if there's any connection to the Chamber of Secrets." Research revealed that Tom Marvolo Riddle had been a student at Hogwarts 50 years earlier, received an award for special services to the school, and served as head boy. More significantly, his time at Hogwarts coincided with the last opening of the Chamber of Secrets, when a girl died and the culprit was supposedly caught. "It has to be connected," Hermione insisted. "The chamber opens 50 years ago, a student gets a special award, and now his diary is somehow involved in the new attacks. That's too many coincidences." Harry privately thought that Tom Marvolo Riddle sounded suspiciously like the kind of name that might produce "I am Lord Voldemort" if the letters were rearranged, but he kept this theory to himself. If the diary did contain a fragment of a young Voldemort, the situation was even more dangerous than he'd initially believed. As Easter approached, second-year students were asked to choose subjects for their third year. Harry selected care of magical creatures and divination, finding himself unable to concentrate on academic decisions while the threat of the chamber loomed over the school. Hermione signed up for everything, including subjects with conflicting schedules, brushing aside questions about how she planned to attend 2 classes at once. The relative calm ended during the Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, when Professor McGonagall suddenly appeared on the pitch with a megaphone, announcing that the match was cancelled and all students must return to their house dormitories immediately. Back in Gryffindor Tower, McGonagall delivered the shocking news: Hermione Granger and a Ravenclaw prefect named Penelope Clearwater had been found petrified near the library, a small circular mirror clutched in Hermione's hand. "This settles it," McGonagall concluded, her voice shaking. "These are the most serious of measures, but the safety of students must come first. Students will return to their house common rooms by 6 o'clock every evening. No student is to leave the dormitories after that time. A teacher will escort you to each lesson. All extracurricular activities are postponed. There will be no evening activities." The attack on Hermione hit Harry and Ron harder than any previous incident. Their best friend, brilliant and cautious Hermione, had fallen victim to the monster despite her precautions. It also eliminated any lingering suspicions about Harry. No one who knew him could believe he would attack Hermione. "We need to talk to Hagrid," Harry decided that evening, pulling out his invisibility cloak. If he was involved last time, he might know something that could help, even if he wasn't actually responsible. Under the cloak, Harry and Ron made their way across the grounds to Hagrid's hut, only to witness a series of strange visitors, first Dumbledore and the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, who had come to take Hagrid to Azkaban as a precautionary measure, then Lucius Malfoy, who delivered an order suspending Dumbledore as headmaster. Before being led away, Hagrid left them a cryptic message: if anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders. That'd lead 'em right. That's all I'm sayin'. Following this advice led Harry and Ron into the Forbidden Forest, where they encountered Aragog, an enormous acromantula, magical spider, that Hagrid had raised from an egg. Aragog revealed that he was not the monster from the Chamber of Secrets and that the girl who died 50 years ago had been found in a bathroom. After narrowly escaping Aragog's less hospitable children, Harry realized the victim must have been Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunted the girl's bathroom on the second floor. With this revelation and Hermione's final clue, a crumpled page about basilisks found clutched in her petrified hand, the pieces fell into place. The monster was a basilisk moving through the plumbing, explaining both the voices in the walls and why the petrified victims had all seen the creature indirectly, through a camera lens, reflection in water, or Hermione's mirror. "We need to tell McGonagall," Ron urged as they huddled in the empty common room, working out the details. But before they could act, McGonagall's magically amplified voice echoed through the castle: all students to return to their house dormitories at once. All teachers to the staff room. Immediately, please. Sneaking to the staff room under the invisibility cloak, they overheard the devastating news: Ginny Weasley had been taken into the chamber itself, with a new message left on the wall: her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. As the teachers dispersed to inform students, Lockhart was tasked with entering the chamber to rescue Ginny, a mission he clearly had no intention of actually undertaking. Harry and Ron confronted him in his office, finding him packing to flee. At one point, they forced him to accompany them to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, where Myrtle revealed she had died after seeing a pair of great, yellow eyes by the sink. Examining the sink, Harry found a tiny snake scratched on one of the copper taps. Focusing on it, he attempted to access the same necromantic connection to serpents that had allowed him to understand the basilisk. Open up. The words came out as a hiss, and the sink began to move, revealing a large pipe wide enough for a person to slide down. With Lockhart at one point, they descended into the Chamber of Secrets. The journey through the underground tunnels led to a partial cave-in when Lockhart seized Ron's malfunctioning wand and attempted to obliviate them, only for the spell to backfire catastrophically. With Ron trapped behind the rockfall, Harry continued alone, eventually reaching a solid wall carved with two entwined serpents. Another command in Parseltongue opened the final door to Slytherin's legendary chamber. Inside, Harry found an enormous stone chamber lined with towering pillars carved with more serpents. At the far end stood a statue of Salazar Slytherin, and at its feet lay Ginny Weasley, pale and still, but not petrified. Kneeling beside her was a tall, black-haired boy who seemed oddly blurred around the edges, as if viewed through misted glass. Tom Riddle, Harry said, recognizing him from the memory Hermione had uncovered of the award ceremony. Harry Potter, Riddle smiled. I've been waiting a long time to meet you. As they spoke, Harry's necromantic senses overwhelmed him with information. Riddle wasn't a ghost or normal memory, he was a fragment of soul, parasitically draining Ginny's life force to become more solid. The diary lay beside her, pulsing with dark energy that flowed between it, Ginny, and Riddle himself. She's still alive, Riddle said, noting Harry's concern. But only just. She put too much of herself into the diary, into me. Enough to let me leave its pages at last. Riddle revealed that he was indeed Lord Voldemort in his youth, that he had used Ginny to open the chamber and release the basilisk. As he spoke, he traced Harry's name in the air with Ginny's wand, rearranging the letters to spell, I am Lord Voldemort. You see, he whispered. It was a name I was already using at Hogwarts, to my most intimate friends only, of course. Harry stalled for time, trying to think of a way to save Ginny while keeping his eyes peeled for the basilisk. How did the diary end up with Ginny? Lucius Malfoy slipped it into her cauldron that day in Diagon Alley, Riddle explained with casual cruelty. He had no idea the diary contained a fragment of my 16-year-old soul, preserved as a weapon against my enemies. A fragment of soul, just as Harry had suspected, just as his mother and Nico had warned. Some kind of dark soul magic that tied Voldemort to the mortal world. Now, Harry, I'm going to teach you a little lesson. Let's match the powers of Lord Voldemort, heir of Salazar Slytherin, against famous Harry Potter with his unusual abilities. Riddle turned to the statue of Slytherin and hissed in Parseltongue, Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. The statue's mouth opened, revealing a dark tunnel from which something massive began to emerge. Harry closed his eyes and backed away, hearing the heavy body of the basilisk slithering onto the chamber floor. Kill him, Riddle commanded in Parseltongue. In that moment of mortal danger, with Ginny dying and a basilisk hunting him blind, Harry made a desperate decision. He opened his death sense fully, reaching not toward the basilisk but toward the spirits of those who had died within Hogwarts over the centuries. I call to those who have fallen to this creature, he intoned in the ritual language Nico had taught him, his voice echoing with power. To those whose lives were cut short by the serpent of Slytherin. Aid me now in stopping this beast from claiming more victims. The temperature in the chamber plummeted as Harry's necromantic energy surged. Spectral figures began to materialize, translucent, silver-blue forms of those who had died during previous openings of the chamber, including a young girl Harry recognized as Moaning Myrtle in her corporeal form. What is this? Riddle demanded, his confident expression faltering. What are you doing, Potter? Harry ignored him, continuing to channel his power. Distract the serpent. Blind its deadly gaze. Give me the chance to destroy that which controls it. The spirits swirled around the basilisk's head, confusing it with their ethereal presence. The massive serpent thrashed in agitation, its killing gaze diluted by the incorporeal form surrounding it. "You're a necromancer," Riddle hissed, a mixture of surprise and calculation in his voice. "How unexpected. And intriguing. We have more in common than I realized, Harry Potter." "We have nothing in common," Harry said coldly, drawing his wand with one hand while maintaining his connection to the spirits with the other. "You corrupt and destroy. I respect the natural order." "The natural order?" Riddle laughed. "Death is not natural, it's a weakness to be conquered. As I have conquered it." While the spirits continued to distract the basilisk, Harry edged toward Ginny and the diary. He needed to sever the connection between Riddle and his soul anchor. But how? Regular spells might not affect a magical artifact this powerful. As if in answer to his unspoken question, a burst of flame erupted above him, and Fawkes the Phoenix soared into the chamber, dropping the sorting hat at Harry's feet before attacking the basilisk, pecking at its deadly eyes. "Even with your pet ghost trick, you'll still die here, Potter," Riddle snarled. "No second-year wizard can defeat Slytherin's monster." Harry grabbed the sorting hat, and something heavy thudded onto his head. He pulled out a gleaming silver sword with rubies set in the hilt, the sword of Gryffindor, according to the name engraved on the blade. With Fawkes having blinded the basilisk and the spirits continuing to confuse it, Harry had a fighting chance. He darted forward with the sword raised, using his death sense to track the basilisk's life force rather than relying on sight. The battle was chaotic and desperate. The basilisk lunged blindly, guided by sound and smell, while Harry dodged and weaved, looking for an opening. Finally, bracing himself against the chamber wall, Harry thrust the sword upward as the basilisk struck, driving it through the roof of the serpent's mouth and into its brain. Victory came at a cost. One of the basilisk's poisonous fangs sank deep into Harry's arm. Pulling it free, he staggered back toward Ginny, knowing he had minutes at most before the venom claimed him. "You're dying, Potter," Riddle observed with cruel satisfaction. "Basilisk venom is fatal. I'm going to sit here and watch you die, and then Ginny and I will leave this chamber together." With his remaining strength, Harry seized the basilisk fang and plunged it into the heart of the diary. Ink spurted from the book in torrents, and Riddle screamed, a long, terrible scream of pain as his form writhed and contorted before finally vanishing altogether. Ginny stirred, her color slowly returning as the soul fragment's hold on her was broken. But Harry felt darkness closing in, the basilisk venom spreading through his body. His necromantic senses showed his own life force ebbing away, the barrier between life and death growing thinner. Then Fawkes landed beside him, laying his head over the wound. Thick, pearly tears fell onto Harry's arm, and where they touched, the pain vanished. The wound closed, and Harry felt strength returning to his limbs as the phoenix tears, the only known antidote to basilisk venom, neutralized the poison. "Harry," Ginny sobbed, having regained consciousness to find him covered in blood. "The diary, it was me, but I didn't mean to, Riddle made me, it's all right," Harry assured her, helping her to her feet. "Riddle's gone. The basilisk is dead. Let's get out of here." They found Ron waiting anxiously at the rockfall, having cleared a small hole. Together with a confused and memory-charmed Lockhart, they followed Fawkes back through the tunnels. The Phoenix led them to a chute that carried them upward to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and from there to Professor McGonagall's office. Inside were Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, who engulfed Ginny in a tearful embrace, along with McGonagall, standing by the mantelpiece with her hand clutched to her heart, and Dumbledore, beaming beside the fire. The explanations that followed were carefully edited by Harry. He described finding the diary among his things after the Valentine's Day fiasco, realizing it contained Tom Riddle's memory, and piecing together that Riddle had been controlling Ginny. He explained their journey into the chamber, the basilisk, and how Fawkes and the sorting hat had come to his aid. What he omitted was his use of necromancy to summon the spirits of previous victims. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes suggested he suspected there was more to the story, but he didn't press for details in front of the others. The aftermath brought sweeping changes to Hogwarts. Dumbledore was reinstated as headmaster, Hagrid was released from Azkaban, exams were cancelled as a school treat, and defense against the dark arts classes were suspended due to Lockhart's hospitalization. Most importantly, Madame Pomfrey's Mandrake restorative draft successfully revived all the petrification victims, including Hermione, who was devastated to learn she had missed the final adventure but impressed by Harry and Ron's detective work. The remaining weeks of term passed in a blaze of sunshine, with Hogwarts returning to normal, or as normal as a school of magic ever got. Harry, however, found himself increasingly uncomfortable with the secrets he was keeping from his friends. Ron and Hermione had stood by him through everything, didn't they deserve to know the truth about his abilities? An unexpected visit from Lucius Malfoy, who had come to the school to confront Dumbledore about his reinstatement, gave Harry the opportunity to free Dobby the house elf, who had been trying to protect Harry all year with increasingly dangerous methods, by tricking Malfoy into throwing a sock that Dobby caught. But the satisfaction of this victory was tempered by Harry's growing certainty that he needed to be honest with those closest to him. On the Hogwarts Express heading back to London, Harry found a compartment with just Ron and Hermione and cast several privacy charms Nico had taught him. "There's something I need to tell you both," he said, his heart racing. "Something I've been keeping secret since before I came to Hogwarts." "What is it, Harry?" Hermione asked, concern evident in her voice. Harry took a deep breath. "I'm a necromancer. I can communicate with the dead, control shadows, and sense spiritual energy. That's how I knew about the diary being dangerous, how I could hear the basilisk when no one else could. In the chamber, I called on the spirits of Slytherin's previous victims to help me fight the basilisk." Silence fell over the compartment. Ron's mouth hung open, while Hermione's eyes had grown impossibly wide. "A necromancer," she repeated finally. "But that's considered the darkest branch of magic. It's not even taught anymore." "It's not dark," Harry said firmly. "Not the way I practice it. It's about respecting the natural cycle of life and death, not corrupting it like Voldemort does." "How long have you?" Ron trailed off, seemingly unable to complete the question. "Since I was 5. My guardian, Nico, he's not just some family friend. He's a necromancer too, probably the most powerful one alive. He rescued me from the Dursleys when he sensed my abilities developing. So all these years, when we thought you were with your relatives during holidays," Hermione began, "I was with Nico, training. Learning to control my powers, to use them responsibly." Ron's expression had shifted from shock to something harder to read. "Were you ever going to tell us?" "I wanted to," Harry said honestly. "So many times. But the wizarding world fears necromancy more than almost any other magic. I was afraid of how you'd react, afraid of what would happen if it became general knowledge." "Does Dumbledore know?" Hermione asked. Harry nodded. "He saw me use my abilities against Quirrell last year. He's been cautiously supportive, but I think he's also wary. Necromancy isn't something he can control or fully understand." "So you can actually talk to the dead?" Ron asked, a hint of fascination breaking through his guarded expression. "Like, properly talk to them?" "Yes. I've been communicating with my parents' spirits since I was little. They've helped guide me, teach me about the wizarding world." This revelation seemed to hit both Ron and Hermione particularly hard, the idea that Harry had maintained a relationship with his deceased parents all these years. "I need you to understand," Harry continued urgently, "this doesn't change who I am. I'm still the same person you've been friends with. I just have abilities I haven't shared." "Like speaking to snakes," Hermione noted. "That's connected to your necromancy too?" "Yes. I'm not actually a Parselmouth, at least, not in the traditional sense. My death sense lets me understand creatures strongly connected to death, and serpents have ancient death associations in many cultures. A tense silence fell over the compartment as Ron and Hermione processed everything Harry had revealed. He waited anxiously, prepared for rejection, anger, even fear. "Well," Ron said finally, "I reckon it explains a lot. All those times you seemed to know things you shouldn't, or disappeared at odd hours. Are you okay with it?" Harry asked tentatively. Ron shrugged. "It's weird, mate, I won't lie. But after everything we've been through, if you say it's not dark magic the way you use it, I believe you." Relief flooded through Harry as he turned to Hermione, who was chewing her lip thoughtfully. "I have about 1,000 questions," she said. "Starting with how necromancy actually works, what the ethical boundaries are, and whether there are books I can read on the subject." Harry laughed, tension draining from his shoulders. "I should have known that would be your reaction. But," Hermione added more seriously, "I understand why you kept it secret. And I'm glad you trusted us enough to tell us now." The remainder of the journey was spent with Harry explaining the basics of necromancy as he had learned it from Nico, how it differed from the corrupted versions described in most wizarding texts, the careful rituals and ethical guidelines he followed, and the responsibilities that came with such power. As the train pulled into King's Cross, Harry felt lighter than he had in months. His two best friends knew his greatest secret and had accepted him anyway. But his relief was short-lived when he spotted two figures waiting on the platform, Nico, looking as intimidating as ever in his black clothing and silver jewelry, and beside him, unexpectedly, Albus Dumbledore in a subdued purple suit that still managed to look outrageously eccentric in the Muggle station. "That's not good," Harry murmured, nodding toward the platform. "Is that your guardian?" Hermione asked, spotting Nico. "He looks intense." "And why is Dumbledore with him?" Ron added. "I have no idea," Harry admitted. "But I'm about to find out." As they disembarked, Harry introduced Ron and Hermione to Nico, who acknowledged them with a nod before turning to Harry. "We need to talk," he said, his expression grave. "All of us." Dumbledore smiled benignly at the students. "Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, I wonder if you might give us a few minutes with Harry? Perhaps you could locate your families and explain that he'll be along shortly." Once Ron and Hermione reluctantly departed, Dumbledore led them to a secluded corner of the station where he discreetly cast privacy wards. "I believe it's time we had an honest conversation about Harry's future," the headmaster began. "Recent events have made it clear that his unique abilities require a more coordinated approach to his education." "You mean you want to monitor his necromancy?" Nico said bluntly. "After seeing what he did in the chamber." Harry's head snapped toward Dumbledore. "You know about that? About the spirits?" "The ghosts of Hogwarts are more observant than students realize," Dumbledore explained. "Sir Nicholas was particularly forthcoming about your impressive display of power. You've been teaching him unsupervised for years," Dumbledore continued, addressing Nico. "While I respect your expertise in certain areas, Mr. Di Angelo, Harry's situation is uniquely complex. As a wizard with connections to both Voldemort and the prophecy, his development requires careful guidance." "Prophecy?" Harry interrupted. "What prophecy?" Nico and Dumbledore exchanged glances, a silent battle of wills passing between them. "There is a prophecy concerning you and Voldemort," Dumbledore acknowledged reluctantly. "Made before your birth, which predicted that you would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. And you never thought to mention this?" Harry asked, anger rising. "All this time, you knew there was a prophecy about me, and you kept it secret?" "I believed you were too young to bear such a burden," Dumbledore said softly. "Perhaps I was wrong." "You were," Nico stated flatly. "Harry has faced Voldemort twice now. He deserved to know why he's being targeted." "The complete prophecy can wait for a more appropriate setting," Dumbledore countered. "What cannot wait is establishing a proper framework for Harry's continued education, both at Hogwarts and in his extracurricular studies." Harry looked between the two powerful men, suddenly understanding that this was about more than just his necromancy. This was a power struggle over his future, with Dumbledore seeking to integrate him more fully into the wizarding world's fight against Voldemort, while Nico sought to protect his independence and connection to the necromantic traditions. "Don't I get a say in this?" he asked. Both men turned to him, seeming almost surprised by the question. "Of course, Harry," Dumbledore said. "Your choices are important. But so is proper guidance." "I've been guiding him for 7 years," Nico pointed out. "And he's handled 2 confrontations with Voldemort successfully. Yet the challenges ahead will require more than necromancy alone," Dumbledore countered. "He needs comprehensive magical training, political protection, and strategic preparation for what's to come." Harry took a deep breath, making a decision. "I want both. I need to continue my training with Nico. My necromancy is part of who I am, not something to be suppressed or redirected. But I also need what Hogwarts offers: wizard magic, friends, connections to my parents' world." He looked directly at Dumbledore. "I'll return to Hogwarts each year, but I won't stop my necromantic development. And I want honest information from now on, about Voldemort, the prophecy, everything that affects my life." Then he turned to Nico. "And I need you to work with Dumbledore where possible, not against him. We're all on the same side against Voldemort, even if we have different approaches." A tense silence followed his declaration. Finally, Dumbledore nodded slowly. "A reasonable compromise, though we will need to establish certain parameters. Perhaps a structured summer curriculum with regular progress reports. And unrestricted communication during the school year," Nico added. "No monitoring of our correspondence." As they negotiated the details, Harry felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. His 2 worlds were colliding in ways he hadn't anticipated, forcing changes he couldn't fully predict. But there was also liberation in having everything in the open, no more compartmentalizing his necromancy from his wizard identity, no more hiding core parts of himself from those who mattered. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Voldemort's inevitable return, the prophecy's demands, the wizarding world's reaction to a necromancer in their midst, Harry would face them as his complete self. The boy who lived and the apprentice necromancer were no longer separate identities to juggle but integrated aspects of who he was becoming: Harry Potter, wizard and necromancer, neither dark nor light but something altogether new. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Some would fear him, others would try to use him, and Voldemort would never stop hunting him. But for the first time since entering the wizarding world, Harry felt ready to embrace his destiny on his own terms, with shadows at his command, spirits as his allies, and friends who accepted him for everything he was. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.